for Advisory Committee. We have 4 more applicants. 2 are scheduled for tonight. We'll have 2 more next meeting. So we have quite a few applicants. Hopefully by the first meeting in September, the board will be able to select members for committees. So we want to get through all the interviews first. So with that, tonight's first applicant is Mark Lasis. He's applicant for the Planning Commission. Come up to the podium and
in a different order.
The board, and then they have a set of questions for you.
Great. Thanks for coming forward. Appreciate it. Yeah. So if you could just give us a little introduction, we have your information. But
I have copies of my resume if anybody's interested.
Oh, if you want to, or
well, we have.
I think we have them.
Yeah,
we got a copy of them. Thank you very much. So.
Well, my name is Mark Lasis. I'm a business lawyer at Ireland Stapleton in Denver, Colorado. I represent businesses and individuals in civil matters. I think particularly pertinent to the Planning Commission, I've represented clients in various real estate matters ranging from purchase and sale transactions, landlord-tenant issues, evictions, construction defect litigation, title failures, easement, boundary disputes. Right now I'm working on a quiet title matter. Had issues actually involving planning commissions in the past, not Superior, but up in Summit County we had a piece of litigation that actually involved active lobbying by one side of a planning commission to try to zone a particular piece of land as open space to diminish the value of the property. So I've certainly worked with planning commissions in the past. I understand real estate issues. On a personal matter, my wife and I, we moved here in early 2014. We have 2.5-year-old twin boys. So if anybody's had toddlers before, 2 of them, they know the practical life experience that you get with negotiating with very, very sensitive issues involving teddy bears and candy disputes and things of that matter. So we love Superior. We're planting roots here. We moved here specifically for the great sense of community in the schools. We're looking forward to seeing our kids grow up in Superior, and if there's anything that I can do to help the Planning Commission do its job, I'd be honored and humbled to serve. So if there are any questions that you have for me, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Very good. Joe, maybe I'll send this your way first.
Okay, well, first of all, Planning Commission meets regularly twice a month. I think it's the first and third Monday of the month. I think it starts at 7. And occasionally they don't have any agenda. They might not meet, but some of the meetings can be long. Do you have any problem with your work schedule and meeting that kind of schedule?
No problem at all.
Okay. You did say you were familiar with in your application, familiar with our comprehensive plan, our Parks and Rec plan, and open space summary report. Have you followed at all the town center?
Yes.
Okay. And so have you been involved in meetings regarding that at all?
Not yet. I've watched some of the meetings online that are archived on Superior's website.
And have you been to any of the Planning Commission meetings?
I have not.
Okay. One of the really great parts of Planning Commission is you get to review Chapter 16, which is our land use code, when we're doing changes to that. And I know being an attorney, you're probably used to that, but are you happy to do that in your off-duty time as well?
I'm more than happy to.
And you can stay awake while you do it.
I chose to go to law school.
My condolences. Oh, that was my answer anyways.
So actually, I love being a lawyer.
Okay. And final question that I would have, I'm a retired attorney, but same question has come to me in the past. Being an attorney sitting on the board, do you have any problem recognizing the difference between you're not the town attorney and just a member of the commission? Is that role, any differentiation on that role, any problem for you?
I think I could easily separate one from the other.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris?
Sure. So the amount of time you spent viewing planning commission meetings or the process you understood for the town center, is there anything that you would have changed or done a little bit differently in the process of the town center development thus far?
Honestly, from what I've seen so far, no. I mean, I watched a handful of meetings, so it's still kind of familiarizing myself with how it all works. But my personal opinion is, if people want to invest time and money and energy into developing our town and making it into something better, I think that that's something that should be encouraged, and any input that the public has should be addressed, but I view the government's and the planning commission's role as one of a collaborator and a facilitator towards working towards smart growth. So I think that, with that kind of philosophical basis, I think working towards, allowing the town to develop in a smart, comprehensive way consistent with the master plan is something that the commission should do. So I would just work towards that end.
Thank you. Deborah?
So you're new to town,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering how you heard about the planning commission opening, and what prompted you to apply.
Well, we moved here March of 2014, and we're planning roots. This is where we want our kids to grow up. So I was looking, I'm on the town listserv and the Facebook group and all that stuff, and seeing what I'm seeing. I think the town's actually really well connected in terms of, and it has a really active citizenry, which I think is just great. I think it's pretty unique. I moved here from Denver, and maybe by design, they didn't want the citizenry to be as active as the Superior citizenry is. But just looking through the town's website, seeing the marquee board in front of the town center that vacancies were open, and seeing the town email that there were vacancies, I talked about it with my wife, and I said, it would be really nice to get involved in the community, get to know people, see if there's something that I can do to really help and work towards making the community, as good of a community as it can be. It's already great, so if there's anything that I can do to help it and plant roots here, I think that would be really rewarding.
Sandy?
So you've watched several meetings. What issues are percolating to the top of your mind as ones you might be interested in?
Well, I think the development, obviously, with the town center is a big one. I know that a lot of people are starting to voice their concerns because they haven't been seeing the progress moving along. So I think that's just kind of a concern of the citizens in general. I think the development, the Calmonte development's interesting in what they're doing there. I live just off of Torrey's on Jade Court, so I drive past that every day. And then just seeing what Old Town is doing in terms of the development out by the park there is also interesting.
And tell us about previous experience serving on any similar committee. You can go all the way back to college in terms of volunteerism and volunteer efforts you participated in.
Well, I don't have any experience on a planning commission per se, other than dealing in lawsuits that have dealt with planning commissions, and haven't had to depose any commissioners yet. But we've had issues related to zoning and land use issues and various pieces of litigation that have come up. Obviously, we've dealt with decisions that commissioners have made in cases that have obviously affected how we proceeded with deals that have been negotiated or litigation that kind of unfolded from those decisions. In terms of past volunteerism, I'm active on the Legal Aid Foundation, which is legal services for the indigent nonprofit that's based out of Denver, but it serves all of Colorado's citizens, and been active in that board. I'm also active on the Mile High United Way, and they have a emerging young leaders program for, I guess you're young these days if you're under 45, which is great, because so.
And not so related to this particular application, but tell me the top 3 reasons you chose Superior.
Top 3 reasons. The schools, the safety, and the safe streets. We lived on a street in Denver where there was a bank that was robbed about every 6 months, and that, you can take 2 robberies in the course of 2 years, but 3 was the line where my wife just said, okay, we're moving. And we really wanted to be someplace where we were close to the mountains and had just kind of access to trails and open space and things like that. So I think that's what's really drawn us here. What we didn't expect once we moved here was actually, we have more friends on our block and down the street than we ever had when we lived in Denver, just because the sense of community here it's just really, really nice. And seeing my kids play with the neighborhood kids is just, it's great. So we love that.
Any questions for us?
I guess, what are you looking for in a commissioner?
That's a very good question, and I think everybody has a slightly different take on it. I'm looking forward to somebody who is willing to spend the time, be open, and look out for the best interest of the town. So that's what I'm looking for. Anybody else?
I would add to what the mayor said, preparedness. The packets oftentimes are several hundred pages, and they go to the mundane, and as Joe referenced, sometimes they're boring, but they're very important. So being prepared for each meeting, having read through the packet, and knowing what's coming in front of you so that you can be part of a meaningful discussion is really important to me.
So, and then my only question is, do you foresee any conflicts of interest serving on the Planning Commission, and if so, how would you address those?
Well, to the extent that, that say there was a client that our firm represented that was applying for something that the Planning Commission was going to rule on, I would obviously raise that issue with the Commission, and I think under circumstances like that, it probably would not be appropriate for me to have a say on any issue concerning that client.
Yeah. And what have you learned as a lawyer having issues associated with maybe bad behavior by the Planning Commission? What are the take-home messages there? Sounds like you've had
What not to do?
The what not to do list, exactly.
Yeah, if I've learned of wrongdoing by a fellow commissioner, well, I think the first starting point would be to look at the applicable regulations to see, what the process is for that, and then.
No, but how can planning commissioners get in a sideways of what their job is? What have you seen that they have? It sounds like haven't deposed anybody, but maybe there's some poor performance on a planning commissioner, and what
Well, in particular, what we had up in Summit County, we had a piece of litigation concerning, it was a title insurance claim. So there was a failure of title, and we represented the developer, and he made a claim to the title insurance company. That title insurance company retained an appraiser to go appraise the property. And instead of appraising the property, he went to the Planning Commission and said, isn't this open space over here instead of being developable land? And he actively lobbied and tried to win over certain of the commissioners. So there wasn't egregious malfeasance on the part of the commissioners. Actually, it was more the malfeasance on the part of the appraiser, who was really going above and beyond what he should have been doing under the circumstances, because he just had he had a duty to independently value and appraise that piece of property. He didn't have he had an ethical duty not to do anything to diminish the value of the property, and he was actively lobbying on behalf of his client to try to do that, so then his client could cut a smaller check to our client.
Okay, got it. Just in terms of process, we've had several applicants, and so what we'll do, and we have a couple of trustees that are gone this evening, so that they'll have the ability to review the tapes. Then we'll discuss it amongst ourselves and then try to make a decision. It seems to be getting pushed out farther and farther with more and more applicants, but my guess is within, I'm not sure by the next planning commission, by the next town board meeting that's going to work, but within a month, I'd imagine.
September 8th.
Yeah,
is what
so,
I've heard.
And then we'll let you know one way or the other.
I have one more question. I'm curious how, in the legal standpoint, and also how you would feel as a commissioner, is how close or not close should you be to a developer?
As a commissioner? In the context of, whether there's a financial interest in the developer or more of a personal relationship?
When a developer is coming forward and you're there to look at what has come forward, an FDP or whatever it is, how important is it to have an arm's length, or is it not important? Is that not a legal issue, or is it a legal issue?
I think it probably depends on the circumstances. I mean, I think just the fact that there's a relationship between a developer and a commissioner shouldn't be a per se disqualification. I think that it should be an issue that should be raised and certainly disclosed. But the fact of the matter is, if you happen to have a personal relationship with somebody, that shouldn't just disqualify the development. If all things considered, it still looks like it's the right development at the right time for the right set of circumstances. However, I think that if there is a relationship that's kind of above and beyond just kind of a typical relationship, something, this is my brother-in-law, and there's clearly a line that you've crossed in terms of the relationship, like this is a familial relationship or best friends, and maybe under circumstances like that, it would be best for the particular commissioner to recuse himself and disclose that interest and let the commissioners decide, absent the input from the particularly or potentially tainted commissioner. Because I think the appearance of impropriety is probably what concerns people more, because sometimes it'll just appear that, oh, well, obviously there was a relationship here, and then there must have been some lobbying going on in the developer's interest, and they got an unfair advantage, and we don't want that to happen. So sometimes it's kind of like what a judge would do under circumstances, even though they can be fair and impartial, just for purposes of preserving the record and making sure that the decision is made in the absence of any particular taint. You just recuse yourself under those circumstances.
And do you represent developers at all?
From time to time, we do. Right now, I'm not representing any developers. We have a quiet title dispute, but we're representing purchaser of a tax lien in that case. But I'd certainly disclose any developers that I've represented in the past, and any developers that I would represent in the future.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So thanks, actually interesting questions, and we could go on for some more time, but we're running out of time, so we'll have to move on. But thank you very much for coming forward, and I agree that one of the great things about the town of Superior is the interest of people coming forward and working on behalf of the town or just within the community in general. It's fantastic. It's one of the great things about being here, so thank you for coming forward.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thanks. All right.
So the next applicant is Joe Keenan, and he's expressed an interest in the recycling conservation advisory.
Great.
Hi, everyone. Andrew.
All right. Welcome. Thank you for coming forward. And
Yeah, sure.
tell us a
Sorry
little bit
about my
about.
tie. I mean, I really feel.
No.
Way
good.
good. Shorts now. Yeah.
It's it's the right committee for that.
Right.
Yeah. So.
That's true.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest in the serving.
Sure. My name's Joe Keenan. I've been in town for 4 years now. Originally from Boston. Did a few years in England, and then we're moving back to the States. It's an area, the Boulder County area is a place that I've always wanted to live and explore and try out. So didn't have any strings attached, so we said, let's go there. And to answer if that question comes up, why Superior, it was easy. My brother-in-law showed up one day on a plane to visit us when we were in England. He had a Money magazine, and on top was Louisville, and that Superior was number 13 at the time. And they said, well, let's start with those towns. And I flew over and saw 24 homes in the local area, and I told my wife, pick one. which one you like, and this seemed to be the one that ticked all the boxes. So, but professionally, I director of business development and sales for the Americas for a large packaging company out of Virginia, and I work out of home. My office is pretty much on a plan to do about 50, sometimes up to 75% travel. I'm also principal in wind and solar business that I started out here when I first came over, which is still alive and well, which is great. Absolute bootstrap. We'll do about $5 million in sales this year. Not enough to pay the bills to live in Superior, so I have this great arrangement where I can work for a corporation, and my boss is very understandable that I can do that business on the side. So, and I also am a non-exec director in a wind O&M business over in the UK that takes care of offshore wind turbines. So.
Great.
So background, just quickly, education is engineering, master's in engineering and MBA. So I went from R&D, moved my way into sales, project management, running a business unit, and now mostly business development type of work.
Great. Thanks. Tandy, do you want to start?
Well, I really don't have any questions, just observations. I think you're perfectly suited for the committee. I like the look. You're ready
thanks.
to get to work.
Tomorrow I'll be in a suit in New Jersey. So.
Well, when you're here, come as you are. So I really don't have any questions about qualifications. I think you're quite qualified, so it's more your interest areas. Are you aware of what RCAC does? Are there particular things? The mayor loved the wind initiative a while back. I suppose he's probably still interested in that.
I still pine about it. But
Yeah.
Still windy.
Yeah. So are there things that have captured your attention and interest?
Well, yeah, and I think number one is something I've been always wanting to give back to the town, and do some. As a family, we try to volunteer when we can as much as possible. But I think when this popped up, it was just showed up on my email one day looking for these vacant, and I'll just be fully honest with you, I do travel, and so there are going to be meetings I miss, and but I believe that from this, what it's all about, the essence, that when I'm time there, that I think I can contribute. I guess one of the what I can bring to the party is a real good understanding, a deep understanding of the topics. When you're talking about clean energy, you're talking about sustainability. I'm well connected in that the groups within the Boulder County area and the Denver greater area, as far as from sustainability to clean energy, and I think also from the skill set I have from project management. When you give me a task, I'll get it done. I'll get it done right, etc. And also being business development, I deal with every day is conflict management and persuasion and dealing with different points of views. And so I think, especially over this past week, reading the Damon list with the plastic bags and how everyone's dander got up and that moved into personal attacks and all over the place. And I think I can add some value there where we can maybe take a different type of look at how can we get this done rather than getting stuck in the quagmire of people talking about slippery slopes and thinking the world's going to end because you have to pay a dime for a bag.
Just a point, I think RCAC still has a spunky start time of 5:30, right? Are you aware of that? They start their meetings at 5:30?
That's fine if I'm not on the road.
Okay.
Because I work out of my home office.
Okay.
So that's very simple.
Good.
I don't have any questions.
Just to expand on what Sandy had asked, is there any one particular area that RCAC focuses on that you think we could be doing better, or something that you would maybe take the lead on?
Yeah, well, I think leading up to this, before I saw the whole Damon list thing, I think the recycling bag was an interesting thing. When I lived in England, that was the norm, and it's funny. It's that you can complain at first, but all of a sudden everyone brings their bags, and it's a behavioral thing. I think that when you say you charge for it, it's at first, a lot of people are resistant to change, but then it creates a behavioral change. And I think that's the things that you look at is from a recycling standpoint, what can you do to try to change behaviors in the positive direction? And no one complained about paying for bags there, and that was well suited. And then, when I go into Boulder Trader Joe's and, I bring my bags in, or if I get them, I just put it in my trunk and I get on with it. So I think the recycling bit is an interesting point. I think there's things we can do more in the town for recycling, and as far as trash receptacles throughout the parks and the community walkways. And I think from conservation, Andrew and I had a conversation about the wind thing some time ago, and I think there's ways we can, and I don't know the details about where we get our power, how much is that renewable energy, but I think there's always things you can do as far as looking at, I guess, reducing the carbon footprint of this town, for sure.
Okay. My typical questions, do you have any questions for us?
I think the only thing is that because of my schedule, I think the promises I make when I am in town, I will be there, and when I get tasks, I will get them done, whether I'm on the road or what have you. Is that okay? I think that's the question I have as far as.
It's a great question. I don't think there's really a right or wrong answer to this. We all understand that people work for a living and people have to be out of town on some
I guess there's a
regular
too
basis.
much.
But the question is it too much? And
Yeah, and that's hard to say.
hard to say.
And we have kind of an attendance policy for committee members and even board members. Well, I guess we don't anymore, do we? But it's just really a question of too much, and letting people know ahead of time is really the key.
Yeah.
That's really the important part. Having been a prior chairperson, I absolutely hated not knowing when people weren't showing up ahead of time,
And too much comes two ways. Too much is too much missing by you, and the other too much is if there are a number of people on the committee who have to miss and quorum can't be met, because official business can't actually be done unless the quorum's there.
Right.
And that is a problem on some committees. So we'll have to find out whether or not, if there's mostly a quorum there and the committee can function, then it functions and there's no problem.
I don't think we could guess ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You only know it when you see it.
And we appreciate
I'm
you.
glad to give it a whirl and do my part if what I can do to contribute to the conversation.
So we appreciate you being transparent about that issue. So, and then same deal. So we'll deliberate amongst the board about, we have a variety of appointments that we need to make, and then it sounds like it'll probably be about a month's timeline. We'll let you know.
That's fine.
All right.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for coming forward. Appreciate it.
So next work session is our discussion of library systems. And Jacqueline Murphy has been good enough to come and speak to the board to share her experiences with the library systems in the current state and what is expected in the future. Jacqueline works with the Public Libraries and Community Development, which is with the Colorado Department of Education, which is their presentation for us. Andrew, you might remember Jacqueline. She worked with the districts 2 and 3 way back when.
Dissolution of the districts, my prior life.
Everybody comes back around.
Isn't that interesting?
That means you've had the job too long.
Yeah, it means I have the job. Well,
good
thank you for
evening.
coming forward.
Thank you. I'm Jacqueline Murphy with the Colorado State Library. I am on the library development team at the State Library, and my position is Public Libraries and Community Development to support all of our Colorado libraries so they can support their communities in the best way possible. As we mentioned, prior to joining the State Library, I was in private practice as an attorney for 15 years, working on various public projects and community amenities, including the dissolution here. The last half of my career was working exclusively with libraries throughout the state. My goal for a brief time is to give you a snapshot of how libraries have evolved to fit 21st century lifestyles and spotlight how they fit into the municipal framework. And when I do strategic planning with different communities and libraries around the state, I like to encourage our trustees to, when we go through here, just think about some of the more pressing issues you have as a community, and then that sort of primes you so you can think about how the library might be able to fill some of those needs. So I have a PowerPoint, and we'll start with some context on our Colorado 21st Century Library. There are 114 public libraries in Colorado, and library visits in Colorado are up. When we look at, for example, Bronco home game visits, there were 913,500 Bronco home game visits in 12 years versus 1 million Colorado library visits in 12 days. So 900,000 Bronco home game visits in 12 years versus Colorado library visits, 1 million Colorado library visits in 12 days. 66 million visits annually to our Colorado libraries, which is more than 5 times as many visits to our Colorado state parks. And lastly, 7 times as many libraries as Starbucks stores in Colorado. So that just always frames things. Of the 114 public libraries, more than half are library districts. The remaining half are city libraries, with the smallest percentage in county library systems. So we have some images here, some of that use and some of those visits. In Colorado, we have 5 outlet types that we use for our reporting on state and national public library statistics. They are the central library, the branch library, bookmobile, outreach vehicle, and other outlets. The central library and branch library are familiar to you as the brick and mortar buildings that you spend time in the actual facility. Bookmobile, there's a picture of the Arapahoe County, Arapahoe Library District bookmobile. This is the interior. Outreach vehicles are vehicles, typically vans, that might partner with a Meals on Wheels program for seniors or in-home daycare centers, bringing a mobile children's library to some of those locations. And other outlets are things like reading rooms and kiosks. This is an image of an outdoor library kiosk. Our libraries empower people, particularly they're active in workforce development. Many libraries began to house actual workforce centers when federal funding dried up for separate facilities for that purpose. This is just a High Plains, which is up in Weld County, their computing center. I have a clip here. Play for you.
Keensburg is a small town on the plains of Colorado.
More and more the resources that people need in order to be successful in their lives are moving online. You can't do a lot of things with e-government unless you're online. You can't apply for a job unless you're online.
I was unemployed. The company I worked at, which I thought I would retire.
Yeah, we'll do a little pump it up here.
Keensburg is a small town on the plains of Colorado.
More and more the resources that people need in order to be successful in their lives are moving online. You can't do a lot of things with e-government unless you're online. You can't apply for a job unless you're online.
I was unemployed. The company I worked at, which I thought I would retire from, ended up closing after 18 years, so I was out looking for a job. I needed skills. I walked in here and I noticed all these new computers being installed in here, and I thought, well, that's pretty neat. I wish I knew how to run one.
I looked around and said, oh, we offer that service here. And I scheduled a local librarian appointment with him. These public computer centers are enabling people to enhance their skills and connect to things that they were kind of being shut out of before.
I was able to create my resume, fine-tune my resume, and send my resume.
These computer centers are much more than just a computer, much more than just internet access. They're an education place, a gathering place. They fill a lot of roles, especially in rural Colorado. We have 84 public computer centers across the state. Some are in libraries, some are in town halls, some are in community centers, tribal museums. The program has been integral to giving us the access to resources and tools and training to help make sure that no one is getting left behind.
Because of skills that she helped me with, now I have a job starting next week.
We also know that libraries revitalize communities. As municipal budgets have decreased, the concept of using the library to gentrify an ailing downtown, for example, or otherwise create a sense of community identity in a commercial area has been effective at increasing sales tax revenues in Colorado and in some other parts of the country. There's numerous examples in Colorado where these projects have been successful. Just in the interest of time, I'll mention a few. In Brighton, the developer there worked with the city, the Urban Renewal Authority, and the library for a joint project where they built a cultural arts center adjacent to the new library facility. So they have joint programming and outdoor concerts and that type of programming in the summer. This is actually downtown Brighton. The project we're talking about is a stone's throw from there. In Fort Collins, there's a Target and Lowe's anchored commercial center where the city negotiated with the developer for location of a library there. That actually houses a museum quality interactive children's exhibit that is a major draw to young families there. And lastly, City of Centennial in the streets of South Glen development, the library's among a Whole Foods and Macy's and other retail and pedestrian-friendly center, and the district itself, Arapahoe Library District, is in developer lease space adjacent to the University of Phoenix. Libraries are an oasis. With all of the natural beauty in Colorado, we of course have natural disasters, and our libraries have played a critical role in community disaster relief. In the last major flood episode, which I know you're all familiar with here, Estes Valley Library, one of the hardest hit areas in the state, the library was one of the few buildings in town that was still standing. And within a day of the townwide evacuation, the library was open for safety briefings and internet access. Many of our libraries in the fires and floods provide shelter for displaced families, and as well as import their public computing centers into evacuation centers for communication and FEMA application completion of those. So these are just some images of the public computing centers. Our libraries build community, and in certain jurisdictions where indoor space may be at a premium programming space for the town, this could be a significant benefit because our libraries are community hubs and that serve a very important role in civic engagement, which it's very heartening to see the amount of civic engagement you have here. So hosting town meetings, legislative representatives, candidate forums, libraries are about equal and open access for all. So during election time, a place for that discussion and election materials. Libraries support health. Our libraries are health connectors. Some of our libraries host community gardens, which the library is the building. This is in the southeast part of the state. This is a rather large community garden that they have. as well as on the right, that's the Denver bookmobile, which Boulder is actually rolling out one of these, no pun intended, rolling out. In particular, this mobile library has done collections specifically on health. But back to just some of the myriad of ways that libraries support health. The community gardens is one, programming on healthy cooking, sometimes yoga classes are held in the library. Sort of statewide, we see the libraries carrying on the subsidized lunch program where necessary, where the school has to drop off at the end of the school year. They do programs where basically with the children, they feed their mind and feed their bodies. So they'll give them a book for continued literacy as well as a healthy meal. So that's something that's increasing as needs progress. I actually have a page on my website called Libraries Create Healthy Communities, so I'm in the process of collecting anecdotes like this because we see more and more programming around this very thing. Libraries are creative and about experiences. To be frank, in our experience, the outlets such as the bookmobiles and the reading rooms have not been totally successful here and in other places, possibly because our libraries are becoming more about more experience-based as opposed to transaction-based. And so the digital kiosk and those types of outlets are more transaction-based, but we're seeing that our libraries are experiential. So you can see here the child doing computer programming with the cables connected to bananas.
We went and walked around the building and saw that there was this enormous, beautiful staircase right out of The Shining or a Stanley Kubrick film, and the initial feeling was you want to just sprint to the top of it and throw things down it. I think having the ability to go into something without knowing the reason as to why you're doing it. So if something interests you, something just clicks for some reason and you're excited about doing it, and then really kind of figuring out the practical output afterwards.
I think the idea of play and experimentation is really important, and I think it's inherent to the studio arts, to the idea of creativity, where students are making things, and by the process of making, you're experimenting, you're failing quickly, rapid failure is something we talk about. And when you do that, I think you don't feel that you have to have an answer right away, and you can move around a little bit, and then you get this thing called discovery, and you discover things along the path instead of simply thinking about the output. What's the final piece going to be?
Once you start to do things and you go off on weird tangents of, oh, I'm working with the circuit, oh, I'm working with code, you start to see, in hindsight, ways that these things intertwine and to be able to combine them together to make unique things in the future. In addition to using the Arduino for the Science Cafe project, we're using a web server, so we've got a MySQL database on the server. We're also running PHP, so the Arduino box is actually pushing the game scores in real time through the internet. It's being stored in the database via MySQL, PHP, and then we're using a combination of HTML5 and AJAX queries with JavaScript to dynamically display the content on the leaderboards in real time. We think, throwing tennis balls downstairs at targets really far away is going to be fun no matter what.
So this is a maker space. So when we talk about the creative experiential environment of the modern library, many libraries are incorporating these maker spaces for a multitude of reasons. This is a maker studio, and these are doing a really great job of serving that tough tween or teenage demographic in the community. They can do GarageBand on here, as well as it's a mini movie and recording studio. We know the reality is that college applications and many job applications require video to accompany them, so these facilities aid in creating a professional product that they can use. So that is all I had, but we, of course, wanted to review libraries as economic engines and revitalizing, gentrifying our communities, relief for community disaster, health connectors, community builders and civic engagement, and creative centers. And I would just mention that I'm a resource for you going forward as you ascertain your needs. And I think we have a few minutes for questions.
Great, thanks very much. I'm gonna grab the lights and Joe.
We're a town of about 12,000, growing slightly. Maybe more than slightly soon. Are there parameters, financial parameters on what would be reasonable for a town our size to consider doing for ourselves that you would have handy or available?
That's a great question. We have a unit in the state library called the Library Research Service. So we collect data from all the public libraries in Colorado. So we have it broken down by population. So, 25,000, 50,000 and up. And so I'd be happy to provide, more data for libraries of a like size if you are interested.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sandy?
How many of those 114 public libraries in Colorado have been erected in the past 5 years or so?
Well, what I can tell you, I don't have an exact figure off the top of my head, but during the Great Recession, as cities and counties budgets were further constrained and they were looking at different municipal services and what they could separate. For example, Parks and Rec and Library has been subject to that. So at that time, we saw a slightly higher number of library districts form, where in which the town or county, as the case may be, can do by ordinance or resolution. And then an election is held for the mill levy because it's a separate political subdivision and it has a separate revenue stream for libraries that way.
So how many were formed in that period?
During the Great Recession period, I can think of maybe like 4 off the top of my head. I was part of a task force and the principal drafter of some changes to the library law that tried to clarify that process, because there were a few that were formed that began to butt up against each other, and so we wanted to make sure there weren't any double taxation issues. And when there was a grassroots group, for example, forming a library district, they knew where the other library district ended and they began, and those types of things.
So this is probably more on point of what I'm interested in. What are the trends?
Library districts are definitely a trend.
We know digitalization and technology and all that. Are full-service libraries going in? New full-service libraries being built, or are they digital libraries? What are the trends in that?
Okay. As I mentioned, in our experience, the other types of outlets like the kiosks and reading rooms have not been as successful and not as heavily used. Our impression of why that is because the trend is moving more towards the experiential library and coming into the library as a place to create and not just a place to check out a book. So we are seeing branches being added. Anything Library, which comprises all of Adams County, did a series of 7 renovations and new builds of branches up there. So
were they book-based primarily, or were they?
They are following more of the model of the experiential library. So they all have a makerspace component and some of the other a lot of use of the outdoor space for outdoor programming, the community gardens. So I would definitely say we're seeing, definitely not seeing a slowing down of the building of a branch library, in Colorado anyway. But to your other point too, the state library's research shows that library districts have increasingly been the mechanism for provision of library services, probably a lot in part due to the Great Recession and the reduction of municipal budgets. Does that answer your question?
So as so new bricks and mortar have not occurred? I mean, I wasn't sure with your answer.
No, I absolutely think there has, in my
In
experience,
Colorado.
not been a slowdown in terms of construction of brick and mortar libraries. Anything is a great example. In the past 5 or so years, built new branches, I think in total 7 new buildings. Some of those were renovating existing buildings, and they added on 3 or so.
Okay.
Questions?
Could you expand on library districts a little bit more, and how that would, how Superior, if we ever were to think of doing our own library, how that would work within a library system?
Libraries are formed whether you were to pursue a municipal library or a library district. It can be done on your own volition as Board of Trustees, Town Board, by ordinance. Ordinance or resolution. The counties do a resolution. And so it is formed essentially by your adoption of the ordinance. Under Tabor, for the district to be funded, you need to have a mill levy election. So that would generally be subsequent to the adoption of the ordinance. Although I have seen in some cases, sometimes, for example, in Berthoud, when the district was formed there, they had an intergovernmental agreement between the district and the town for a period of 3 years because it was coming out of the Great Recession and they wanted to give the library district the best chance at being viable. So the IGA said that they would have a 3-year period to get a mill levy passed. So during those 3 years, the library was funded by the town, by IGA, biannual appropriation.
Okay, so the library district would be its own taxing entity
Right.
within this town, not necessarily a smaller part of a larger area, but just this town.
Right,
Gotcha.
library districts can comprise a full town boundary, a county boundary, a portion of a county, 2 counties. It's a process of defining a legal service area that makes sense, in your region.
Okay.
There's also regional library authorities, and I know we're limited on time here, and so that's why I offer myself as a resource later as well. But that, like other authorities, is created under state statute by intergovernmental agreement.
Okay.
And admittedly, that statute hasn't been used in Colorado yet, but I do get a lot of questions about it. It's available for invoking that.
Okay.
Statute.
Just to add on to what Joe was asking about the data, I think it'd be great if you came back for a work session with us, and that we could really focus on just this for an hour or more, on what would be appropriate for our town.
Happy to. In terms of, just to make sure I understand, so like communities and the operating budgets associated with the libraries there?
Yeah, and the different types of libraries that would be suitable for our town. And we've got a really good relationship right now with Louisville Library.
Right.
But we've got residents in town that are saying, hey, let's do our own. Does it make sense to do that? Our ProStack is right now going to be starting a survey to the community, and part of the questionnaire is to understand if a library is suitable or wanted here.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have some data for you based on that survey.
Okay.
But it'd also be interesting to hear what you have to say about that.
Sure, I'd be happy to pull that. Again, it's the Library Research Service that where we collect it, so.
Great. probably have to wrap it up because we're at 7 o'clock and need to start our regular
Okay, well,
town
thank
board
you
meeting.
for having me.
But thank you so much for
And
coming.
I have just some of the
Great.
statistics I talked about. This is something the Library Research Service puts out as well. Quotable facts about Colorado libraries, so
Great.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Andrew,
it.
if I may, Beth
Yes.
Barrett, director of the Louisville Library, is sitting in the back row in the back, and some of you may not know her or can put a face with a name. So Beth, if you wave, she's our very capable Louisville Library director.
I just wanted to, it's
You have to do it up here.
I know you're at 7, so I'll talk fast. But it's interesting to hear what Jacqueline has to say and to look at how that's manifested throughout the state and just in our region. There has been a lot of talk just recently about, are there ways to collaborate, to cooperate, and so the Louisville Library is part of a larger consortium, a consortium of 3 libraries with Boulder and Broomfield. And I think there's interest throughout this part of the county in expanding that. I think there'll be some really good opportunities for collaboration, cooperation, resource sharing, some good ways to make really good use of our dollars, our tax dollars. So that's something to just be aware of that's coming, I think, in the next year or so.
And I just wanted to ask one question. How do you feel about a library district?
I think you have to have a climate. I worked for 20 years in a library district, which just opened a huge new library, by the way, just about 3 weeks ago, just to the south of us, Pikes Peak Library District. I think they can be really effective. I also think I'm really interested in this consortium expanding because I think that we can. I don't see that there's a lot of willingness on the part of some of these municipalities to give up their library or it's their community's library or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's hard, I think, for some cities to think about that. We happen to be in an unusual place in that we have a lot of strong municipal libraries. Boulder, for example, Longmont, Loveland, Lafayette. And I don't know that there's the political will to go out and try and get that taxing authority, that separate taxing authority. But I do think there are ways for us to gain some of those cooperative savings. And I'm excited. We've met a couple of times, had some people from around the state come and give us some advice, and we'll continue to meet. I think our next meeting is in September, to talk actually about what the legal aspects are of creating a separate 501c3 for this entity.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I was interested to hear what the state of the library was from the point of view of the state library, too. Thanks.
All right, so why don't we take a couple minutes for anybody that needs to take a couple minutes, and then we'll start after that.
It's always wonderful to have a
Call to order a regular meeting of the Town of Superior Board of Trustees for August 11th, 2014. And Phyllis, if you call the roll.
Mayor Andrew Malcolm.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Joe Sorelli.
Here.
Trustees Delia Gregorius. Chris Hansen.
Here.
Sandy Pennington.
Here.
Lisa Skumans. Debbie Williams.
Here.
Town Manager Matt Magnin.
Here.
Town Attorney Liz Cross.
Here.
Town Clerk Phyllis Harder.
Very good, thank you. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? That was a wave. And
That was a wave. It was not a
Okay,
change.
Not a change. Okay, I don't see any, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda by Trustee Sorelli, second by Trustee Bennington. All in favor?
And I
Unanimous?
abstained from the minutes.
Okay. That brings us to item number 4, reports, questions, and issues. Trustee Hansen, would you like to start?
Sure, yeah, just a quick question for the town manager. Matt, there's a slowly accumulating mound of dirt on Christensen Street, and I'm wondering what that is for, and had residents ask about that.
It's for the street project. They're just using it for, we don't have many places to put the materials that they need or remove and need to put in place until they can be permanently removed. So that's one of the locations.
So that's a holding place, or is that material that's going to be used for some rehabilitation in the streets in that
I'm not
subdivision?
sure. I can follow up with you on that. I'm not sure if it's material they removed. It could be both. It could be material that they removed and material that they're going to use. So
Okay.
I'm not positive yet.
Yeah, I don't think there's been any rehabilitation in that subdivision yet, so that's why I was wondering if it might
No,
be
yeah,
for that.
It's, there will be, once they get out of the Waterford subdivision and get over there, then that material will be for that neighborhood, but for now, it's in the other neighborhoods.
Okay. Yep, just, if you could confirm, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it, thanks.
Trustee Sorelli.
I really have nothing to report, so.
Okay. Trustee Williams.
You're skipping yourself?
I'm skipping myself.
Okay. Then I have just only one thing. I attended a West Connect Coalition group meeting that involves completion of the Beltway, is basically the best way I could put it, or some alternative of that, whatever the coalition ends up determining the problem is and the solution thereof. So basically, the way the meeting went is we're just sort of involving the charter and semantics of that charter. And it's all pretty much being centered around the word consensus and how you define consensus and how you operate under a consensus. Because half of the, well, not even half, about a third of the members are voting members, and then 2/3 are non-voting members. Way it's structured now is that as a vote, you're the paying member and you make the decisions. As a non-voting member, you are involved in what's called consensus. But what I was trying to work with, and what we were all trying to discuss, was what did consensus mean? Is it a general agreement? Is it a unanimous agreement? There's many different definitions in the out there, and so that is basically where it's being held up in the charter. So we'll have another meeting to discuss where we're going to go with that. I mean, at this point, I think you all discussed already that, you know, you're not looking to being a paying member, and I'm not even sure if that's even an option, even if you wanted that. However, I think it's important to be part of the group, just to see what happens if it actually becomes a coalition or if it doesn't. And I'm actually wondering if this is even a true coalition, in my opinion. And I'm sure this is all going to get out there and I'm going to be lambasted at the next meeting, but I don't really care. You know, to me, a coalition is where every member's input is represented. And I'm not so sure through this charter that's even possible. at this point. So at some point, I may be coming back and saying this is just not even worth our time.
Is this is just mostly about the Jefferson Parkway, or I thought it was more about transportation in the region?
It is about transportation in the region, but there is no defining problem, issue that has been identified. So they're basically saying you need to be a paying member in order to vote, and we have a study, and whatever comes out of that study is what we will be funding. And when you ask about what the study it is, it's very vague. So at this point, everything is vague. And I think the charter needs to say, well, what is the problem? What are we here as a common thread? Why are we all here? And what is the common goal we're trying to reach? And that hasn't been established either.
Yeah. So how would this group be different from, say, Dr. Cog? Dr. Cog is statewide, but this would be more just regional? Is that?
How would it be different? That's a good question. I think it would be different in the fact that we wouldn't have a vote. And we do have a vote at Dr. Cog.
Well, Dr. Cog also has federally
And
authorized authority
Correct.
to represent the region. So
Dr. Cog could actually overrule anything that they would do?
I think anything these guys really want to do probably would have to go through Dr. Cog.
Yeah.
It would, definitely.
Okay.
But already the Jefferson Parkway has gone through Dr. Cog and has been approved. It is in what they call that Metro Vision 2040 plan. So.
But not as eligible for public money.
It's not eligible for federal or state funding. It's only eligible for a local, 100% local funding. However, that could change.
Yeah. And did they determine exactly what the ante is for every participating municipality or group?
They
Voting
did.
member?
There's a little wheel, I don't know if you've seen it, of who would be contributing as a paying member and how much. And if we were a paying member, it would probably be $5,000 or maybe even less than that, based on population. It would not be 200,000. As you guys were discussing it.
Yeah.
Jefferson County is paying 200,000. And then, just so you know, based on this coalition forming, not RTD, but CDOT has pledged that they would put $1.5 million, I believe, is about $1.5 million of funding into whatever study that the group, agrees on.
So that CDOT would do that regardless of whether Superior was involved or not. They'd put that money into the fund.
Correct.
It almost seems like, and this could be another conversation, but a $5,000 buy-in to be a voting member, to have a bigger, more say in what they do, to me almost sounds worth it. That
if and only if a problem is identified,
right,
and a common problem that we all agree that we're all working towards. There isn't one at this point, and I think it has to be defined, because if they're going to say it's to build the Jefferson Parkway, then you may not agree with that, and you might not want to put the $5,000 in, being a voting member.
Well, and there's going to be more financial commitment than just that membership fee. Once the vote is taken as to what the priorities of this group is, isn't there the presumption that as extra costs are incurred, those will be equally shared among
that
voting
is true.
members?
That is true.
And that's where the real money comes in.
Yeah,
Correct.
that definitely need to understand that. But
but it's not spelled out.
Okay.
It's so vague at this point that walking into it is Russian roulette. It's gambling, in my opinion.
Deb's got to be politically correct because she's
I'm not trying to be.
She's our representative, but I don't have to be politically correct because I don't have to go there and get chastised. But the real concern here is if you look at the founding membership, there's an uncanny overlap with the founding membership of the Jefferson Parkway Public Highway Authority. My concern is really that that has not succeeded in accomplishing what they wanted to do, in part because they're limited to private monies and can't go after public monies, or their approval by Dr. Cog, and you can correct me, Deb, is null and void. So I am just quite concerned that they're trying to change the look of this group, renaming it, et cetera, but still having largely the same mission. And we've got to be very, very careful how we participate in that.
But, so, going back a year ago, or a year and a half ago, we were shut out of several executive sessions by that committee, and we were saying, wow, wouldn't it be nice to be involved in those discussions? And if we only have to pay $5,000 to be able to be a part of those discussions and really understand what's happening with Jefferson Parkway and the movement forward or backward or whatever, to me, $5,000
Well, I
is
think
worth
we have
it.
to understand the full financial
Agreed.
commitment here. I had not heard 5,000 until Deb told me. I had heard the much larger number we discussed
We heard
last
200,000,
night.
and that makes you
Yeah.
stop thinking, wait
Right.
a minute, we might be funding
And
the
that's
Jefferson
not
Parkway,
the whole
and I get
financial
that.
commitment. So I
No.
think Deb needs to come back with,
It would be pretty nominal what the dues would be, but the point being here, and I agree with you, just on the surface, when you see it and you think, well, for a vote, I only have to pay $5,000, and I can influence the group or influence the outcome to be more representative for all interests and ours. Why not do that? But at this point, the way the charter is written, I can't tell you for sure in what direction we're going to end up in.
So, more information.
Correct.
So I think that we need to get more information, but I would be in Trustee Pennington's camp that would be very circumspect about this, because my guess of what's happening here is that they need a bigger group that is interested in financed infrastructure improvements that would involve C470, and so then everybody's going to agree that C470 needs something, and if the Jefferson Parkway is part of this, then it's all just going to be moving forward. So once again, I would be very, very careful about that.
And I actually think the key here is CDOT.
Okay.
That CDOT is at the table and allowed to be a voting member is something to think about. Why? Why are they at the table?
Yeah. I agree with what you'd said, Andrew, but we also 2 weeks ago understood something totally different.
Yep.
And since this just came up, that $5,000 or whatever that is, that we should be encouraged to really investigate a little bit more on what what it takes to get involved in this, and then what the potential ramifications are.
And right now, it's all preliminary. The charter is being written. There's lots of discussion on it. You're welcome to come to the meeting, by all means. But nobody has made any decision whether they're going to be on this coalition, or a voting member, or a non-voting member.
Okay.
But all we do know is CDOT wants to be a part of it and wants to fund some of the studies.
Okay. Trustee Pennington?
okay, several things. I wanted to draw to your attention, if you didn't read it, about the great attendance at two of the outdoor events that were part of OSAC's newest mission this year to do more outdoor education. And Jeff and Paige concert in Founders Park. I was out of town, so was it about a month ago? 250 residents attended. I thought that was just fantastic, both as a promotion for the park and as a new event. Then Zoo Night last week, Matt sent something out that I think 60 attended that, filled up the fire station. So obviously there's a demand for that type of programming. Having the library presentation prompted a reminder in my head. The Louisville Library Board of Trustees gives a presentation every year to the Louisville City Council. And we discussed last meeting, shouldn't that come to Superior as well? And I said, sure it should. Let me ask. Anyway, so I'm seeing all the nods. So They just gave that, they either just gave it or they're just going to give it here. So maybe, Matt, you can invite them to attend. And then I wanted to say I support Chris's idea about having a separate work session on trends in modern day libraries, et cetera. I think I'd like to see it a little bit augmented with maybe another person as well as Jacqueline. I don't know, maybe somebody who's nearby who's actually revamped their library or something and what they learned doing that or whatnot. But I think having a separate work session is a great idea. I wanted to address two issues that didn't proceed very smoothly this week. And I think the board can play a role in making sure they proceed more smoothly in the future. The first was the Engaged Superior effort on bag fees. Frankly, I was surprised it appeared, and I don't know if staff was telling me they're sort of surprised it appeared too, or if that was an intentional thing. But on that, I would like us to maybe have a policy submitted as to when we use Engaged Superior and how we use it. Because to me, it should be sort of the outreach survey mechanism to the community. And in this case, because the trustees already had a meeting on the subject, we had asked RCAP to come back to us, and having answered some of their questions. And they're coming forth, and when they come forth, we may decide, there's no merit to this idea. So this smacked a little bit of the cart before the horse to me, and it got a lot of people in this community, as a previous speaker said, a little riled up on the internet. And sometimes with board direction, yes, maybe we should go out first before it comes to the board. But sometimes it should come to the board first and have our requests go out for further input from the community. So I just don't like to see that thought about. Maybe in a retreat, maybe we can bring it up or something. And then the other thing is an issue with, I'm going to use the names of the committees, and I think any finger pointing's got to go back to the board on this particular one. ProStack scheduled a meeting on Parcel 3 in the park, which is the one contiguous to the cemetery and coming down to that main street there, with the developer, and it overlapped the regularly scheduled meeting time of OSAC. And OSAC has a vested interest in Parcel 3 because that's where the lion's share of the open space in the Superior Town Center was, as far as the open space calculation went. So they're a little sensitive about that. And Historical Commission also has weighed in on what they want to see happening around that cemetery. And as I was thinking about this, because it turned into a little bit of a heated internet exchange this afternoon, and I think, unfortunately so, the question came to me is how did our committees think that we had authorized separate meetings on separate parcels in the Superior Town Center? And I'm a little baffled about that because we had our master presentation on June 30th from Design Concepts. Prior to that, ProStack had a unanimous vote approving Design Concepts on all 5 parcels. Subsequent to that presentation, OSAC had a meeting in which they unanimously supported all 5 parcels as designed by Design Concepts. And nonetheless, separate meetings have been arranged with the developer. And I think what happened is a bit of confusion. If you remember, we have in front of us a PD, and that PD was supposed to be voted on in maybe in late June, and then in early July, then in late July, and now it's on the table to August 25th. And you'll remember on June 30th, right after the Design Concepts meeting, there was right at that meeting, there was confusion about what to do about those two parcels that are in this PD. Those parcels were the dog park and the village green. Had nothing to do with parcel 3. And I think the ProStack chairman volunteered to coordinate a meeting of interested parties after the June 30th presentation because we needed guidance as a board for this outstanding PD or FDP or whatever the heck it is. And you'll recall that meeting was called sort of on an emergency basis the next day, and we got a lot of heat for that being called so quickly because not a lot of people could attend. As a consequence of not many people being able to attend, ProStack then offered to once again have a ProStack meeting. You'll remember that the ProStack chair bristled at the representations by the developer that ProStack agreed with the developer on some aspects. And ProStack said, no, we only had 3 or 4 members there. We'd like to have our whole committee consider 1 and 4, which they did, and that's been dispensed with. But I've got a feeling that this meeting that's emanated on parcel 3, which is a wholly different parcel that there's no time crunch on, that is not the subject of a current FDP, may have come to pass because of the feeling that the committees are still being asked to weigh in. And that is against my belief, and that's why I'm bringing it here. I think that the extra meeting on parcel 1 and 4 emanated from that June 30th meeting, but I don't think this board has asked the separate committees to proceed any further on any more consideration of any additional parcels. But nonetheless, this one is in process. It's OSAC canceled their meeting on Wednesday so they could attend the ProStack meeting. I understand Historical Commission has been invited and now it's a joint meeting. But my whole diatribe here on this is the board has to be very deliberate in its intention of what it is asking the committees to do any longer on these 5 parcels in Superior Town Center. If we want further meetings from our advisory committees, we've got to explicitly ask that. We've got to explicitly govern, should they be joint meetings? Should the developer be there? Should Design Concepts, our subcontractor, be there? Who should moderate them? Should staff moderate them? Or should a committee chair moderate them? So there's a host of these things. And so I just felt it needed to be aired a little bit more. I know we've got 2 committee chairs out there who have opinions on what has happened here, but I really do think it comes back eventually to the board and what is, if we even need any more help. Ultimately, we have to decide as a board, and I think we're there. I'm very prepped by all the work that's been done by the committees for that discussion. So I personally don't need any more advisory committee meetings on this. But if others feel they do, I think we've got to be very careful in delineating what the tasks we're asking for and how that process should proceed. And with that.
If I may, real quickly, we had asked ProStack to do a presentation on their choices of what would happen on those 5 parcels. And as I understand it, every parcel, actually parcel 4 has not been represented back to the board, correct? So we're going to talk about their recommendations for parcel 4.
Can I make just one recommendation on how to proceed here? Because we're not in the public hearing right now, so we need to be pretty careful that we're not discussing anything. I think it would be important to have a conversation about how the processes work, not necessarily related to this public hearing. I think it would be a good discussion, but short of that, I think we should be pretty careful about.
My opinion, Chris, is we did authorize ProStack to deal with parcel 1 and parcel 4, and they have done that. And the reason we asked them to do that is because of the June 30th presentation by Design Concepts, which came after Randy did his first presentation on the currently active FDP that has parcel 1 and 4 in it. Beyond that, ProStack has already voted unanimously to support parcels, all 5 parcels actually, and we never asked them to reconsider parcel 1 or parcel 2. We only asked them to give us further opinion on parcel 4 and the dog park part by the cemetery, and we didn't ask them to give us further opinion on parcel 5. They came to us and said they had unanimously voted in support of the Design Concepts version.
Okay.
So,
well, just understanding that we are outside the public hearing, that there's still some question within ProStack on what should happen on certain parcels. And there was enough uncertainty that ProStack felt that it would be very useful to meet with the developer to see if there could be some consensus between the two groups. And I think that that's a healthy discussion to have. And as far as the timing of that meeting, again, ProStack decided at the last meeting, this is just a couple of weeks ago, that this would be, or they would reach out to the developer, and then this Wednesday is the best time for everybody to be there. So again, ProStack was charged with certain tasks, and they're a great advisory group, and they're doing what they can to get through everything and not try and be here at 10:30 every single meeting.
right. Well, respectfully, there's no bigger supporter in this room than I have been of ProStack. I mean, I love ProStack's work. I'm a huge supporter of ProStack's work. But respectfully, when we got that presentation from Design Concepts for the 5 parcels, which ProStack had endorsed unanimously, I don't believe we authorized them to do additional work beyond the dog park and parcel 4. So that's where I asked the board to be very proactive on those parcels as to what it's asking or what its committees believe they've been asked to do. And this is the 3rd meeting that I am asking that when we do these meetings, because if ProStack does a meeting with the developer on parcel 3, OSAC wants to do a meeting with the developer on parcel 3, Historical Commission can call for that. So the way in which we coordinate those, if this board says we think that meeting would be productive, this board can also say, but it should be joint, it should be moderated by a staff member, it should have our subcontracted representative, Design Concepts, who we've paid lots of money to put forth the plan they think is best for the town. So that's where I asked the board to assert some control and over this process if it is to proceed forward.
Okay. But we agree that those 5 parcels were ProStack projects.
Huh?
We agree that those parcels were ProStack projects that they were working on. And I don't,
we agree
like you, I agree.
Your first part, we agree.
Like you, I agree that our advisory committees do a good job. But, and we support every one of them.
Right.
But there comes a time when we can't hold up a process to make accommodations for everybody. If anybody else can get to this meeting, that's great. I mean, all the meetings are open to the public. They can come and view.
Chris, I think you're missing
my
my point. My point is we never asked any of our advisory committees to do further work on parcel 3 as a board.
It's unfinished.
No.
The decision on it's unfinished.
They rendered a unanimous vote on parcel 3.
It's unfinished. They have not made a decision on it.
Well, we're going to have to agree to disagree because OSAC rendered a unanimous vote for Design Concepts version of parcel 3, and I think they believe their work had been done. And they were a little surprised that this was being opened back up. But anyway, this is ultimately the board who decides what they want their committees to do. It's all part of work plans, it's all part of assignments. So I'm just bringing this to the fore because it's been somewhat of a difficult issue the past week, and not all of the board was CC'd on the emails. So some of the board members may not even be aware that this has transpired.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
So, can I ask, where are we at with this meeting, and what, I mean, who's attending, and what is the goal of the meeting? Anybody?
So the meeting is Wednesday, 7 p.m. here at Town Hall. Pro Stack members, Open Space Advisory Committee members, Historical Commission commissioners are invited, as well as anybody else in the public that would like to attend. They're going to look at design concept plan again. They're going to review that. They're going to review
For what parcel?
Parcel 3.
Only.
As far as I know, yep. Parcel 3, and then the developer's plans, and have a discussion. There'll be no, as far as I know, no vote will be taken, notes will be taken, and then the committees can forward.
And what's the end goal? What are they trying to do? I mean, does ProStack and OSAC not like the vote they had on Parcel 3, or what? I mean, is there...
I think somebody from the committee would be
unhappy with our vote and not
in a better position to answer that than myself, because I haven't been at the meeting. So.
Okay, can I have?
So
is it okay if I have?
Yep, that would
both?
be.
Thank you.
So, my only request is that we don't start micromanaging our committees and have them to have as much authority as possible. But
I actually would like and came tonight to ask for guidance on this process in general.
I'm sorry, I need your name.
Sorry, Sharon Tedeschi, Chair of OSAC, also Town, 2070 Shamrock. I came tonight to just talk about the process in general and what the committees are actually mandated to do and what our legal rights to do are. Because my understanding is we're supposed to give you an independent, unbiased decision based on our discussion. When you introduce the developer into the discussion at the committee level, you're immediately sort of splitting the baby, biasing what I think should be the board's decision. And I'm really concerned that, A, there was a complete breakdown in communication and understanding by the committees. When I spoke before this meeting, we were both given different information and are both frustrated by the lack of communicated information. Which we're volunteers, and we don't have the education. You as a board asked for design concepts as the expert to give a design that is based on their recommendations from years of experience designing these parks. It was our understanding that both ProStack and OSAC, because it was a rushed and immediate needed decision, everyone worked double time to get to the June 30th presentation. The only understanding that I understood, and I was frustrated by the 4-hour notice for a July 1 meeting when I was out of town, was to discuss Parcel 4 in the dog park. Patricia stepped up, and I also don't understand the thought that ProStack would continue to work independent after Patricia stood up and said OSAC needs to be involved in these discussions. And I think the board unanimously said, yes, OSAC should be a part of those discussions. I think we have a relevant voice in these discussions, but I also think we all voiced our opinions. We gave the recommendations, and to now allow the developer to come in and independently bias our recommendations to the board, I don't know. I think that's your decision. I don't think it's the committee's. We gave you an independent, unbiased recommendation, and I think those recommendations should stand, and I don't think Wednesday night's meeting is necessary or should even take place. That's just my...
Thank you.
Hi, Board. Brent Bickle, ProStack Chairman. I want to make very clear that we are doing what we've done and have scheduled the meetings that we have scheduled at your direction. And the board, there's a process which determines what the board direction is. Every time we have a meeting, it doesn't matter what somebody in the audience may say, what a trustee may think they said, or think they heard somebody said. It's up to town staff to review the video of the meeting and then go over it and determine what the board direction actually is. So at the May 27th meeting, I believe, this is from memory, the developer came up and proposed what they called their Concept A. that concept was different than what our concept was. And because of, I believe it was that meeting, it could have been a later meeting, but whatever, there was some confusion about what we were supposed to do. Because we made our recommendations, and then they had their concept A, and the board specifically said, I remember Trustee Pennington saying, well, you're done, do you want to be done? And then someone says, well, do you want to meet with them? Do you want to try to work something out? Maybe you can come to a compromise plan. So I asked the town staff after that meeting what our direction was. I have an email from Patrick Hammer, Parks and Rec Director, that says, remember that was the 80-20 split, where the developer offered to put 80% or do a cost share if we had a plan that we came up with that was substantially similar to their plan. So we were directed, town staff, through this email says, your direction is to try to work something out. You know, meet with the developer, and then we will have this 6-month process. There's supposed to be consultants and this and that if you can try to work out something similar. So the first step to that is to have a meeting and to sit down, because this is a park, and to talk to the developer about it. That was at board's direction. The second situation, the meeting that we're having, relates to the meeting that we had on parcels 3, which was the dog park that the developer put into their plan, and then parcel 4, which was the village green. We have recommendations on those. The board told us we want recommendations, we want them by August 11th, we want it for August 25th meeting. We did that. And then as part of that process, because the OSAC came up a lot for open space, I specifically asked and got a response from Matt Magley to say, what is OSAC's role in this? And the response came back was, OSAC, you know, I don't recall hearing that OSAC must be included in your meeting. You know, it's a meeting, they can have public comment, they can hold their own meeting, they can have their own recommendations, they can do whatever they want. I have never received any direction from town staff as coming from the board that OSAC was to be included in this at all. So I was simply doing, and again, to Trustee Pennington's point, one of the things that we've really struggled with, and we've had to put on staff, because some of these meetings can be very confusing, is what exactly do you want us to do? Tonight we're going to talk about a survey that started out as an indoor space recreation needs assessment. We had a timeline for the survey. And now we're going to talk about a survey that we've added a lot of things to, and it's not really what it is anymore. So I must be frank that I can echo Chairman Tedeschi's concerns that, you know, there's a lot of confusion. It's about what we're supposed to do. But I'll tell you, it's also very disappointing to us when we're doing what we've been tasked by the board to do, and then all of a sudden, there's a change in the plan. Instead of our meeting, it's a joint meeting, because now apparently the plan has changed again. So it is very frustrating, and the more specific direction we can get from the board, the better. Thank you.
Sharon Tedeschi, Chair again. I guess I'm just asking for advice as to whether or not committees should be negotiating with developers and biasing their independent recommendations to the board, because I don't think we should be doing that. So I'd like an actual answer to that question.
For the record, ProStack isn't negotiating anything with the developer. No, like the chairman of ProStack said, that there was the idea that there'd be an 80-20 split if they could come up with some consensus on a mostly developer-approved plan. And that's all that their ProStack is doing, is seeing if they can come up with this. I would love to have the developer pay a large portion of any one of our amenities in town, if it's possible. And that's all this is to take the design concepts plan, share it with them, see if there's a possibility of having a joint effort on that, and move on with it. If not, great. We'll move on with the original design concepts plan.
The 80-20 split is for the board to determine. I think it would be most unwise to thrust that for consideration on any committee. That should never be a committee's concern.
But it's not.
I think what Chairman Tedeschi is asking is very relevant. The developer, putting the committee in the role of having the developer there, it's a difficult position. And what's troubling about this is I've asked repeatedly that wherever the developer gives a presentation on an issue that we've paid Design Concepts as a subcontractor to advise us, that Design Concepts should be there as well. At Wednesday's meeting, we're going to have the developer promoting his ideal version, but we don't have Design Concepts there to represent what they think is in the best interest of this community. So it's an imbalanced meeting. So I think particularly for Wednesday's meeting, what are we going to do about that? And it does put those committee members in a situation, and it puts us as trustees in a situation, because when the committee members, when their feedback is given back to us, the whole goal here is that we get meaningful opinion from our selected committee members. And if those committee members come back and say, well, we never heard from Design Concepts, we only heard from the developer, I have to discount what comes out of that meeting because they didn't hear both sides. So if the developer is going to be there, Design Concepts has to be there. If Design Concepts can't make it for whatever reason, and the developer is deemed essential, then the meeting's got to be rescheduled to where both parties can be there. So that is why I couched my entire discussion prior to this in terms of the board determining sort of the framework on the continuing discussions by the committees, particularly on the Superior Town Center park issue. So I go back to that. I think what we're being asked here is for the board to clarify what it expects and how it expects these committees to proceed.
So this is what these are chartered to give the board advice, and as much information as they need to glean from whatever sources that they feel is appropriate to glean to give an educated opinion. I think that's all the board is asking for. And once again, I'm very cautious about trying to micromanage what the board, what these committees are doing.
It isn't micromanaging.
Well, trying to tell them that.
It's their annual work plan.
Okay. From my perspective, it's micromanaging.
Yeah.
So we'll agree to disagree.
This is part of their annual work plan to put together the public engagement process in Superior Town Center. In my opinion, they have done that, and what is left for them to report back to the board on is Parcel 4, the Village Green, and the dog park. And I'm like I said earlier, I'm sort of surprised about this continuing emphasis on Parcel 3. So they're asking for direction. I think we need to give direction. And I'd ask you if...
So my direction is that they should meet however they feel like they should meet. Whatever they think is most important, that's what they should do.
And I have no concerns whatsoever that ProStack has been working with Green Play and Design Concepts for a long time on multiple projects, and I have 100% confidence that ProStack will be able to represent the town and their designs well. We didn't force them to do this. ProStack in the last meeting said, we would like to meet with the developer again and see if we can come up with consensus. At the end of the meeting on Wednesday night, they may say, nope, we don't like the developer's plan. We're going to stick with the original Green Play plan.
The broader issue is, do we direct what we would like our committees, the areas of focus? I thought that was the purpose of the annual work plan. Or do the committees determine what they want to do and tell us?
Well, they'll determine what they want to do, and then they will come to us and say, here's our work plan. Do you approve it or not?
But we never approved this aspect.
We did.
It never was presented to us on Parcel 3.
We approved the work plan for the 5 parcels, and this one is inconclusive at this point.
Well, they voted unanimously for it. How can that be inconclusive? But Deborah, I'd like to...
But I was going to expound on what you just mentioned, that the advice that comes from these committees based on Green Play and Design Concepts, their plans that they've brought forward are what the board has asked, and they're a third party that is designing it, and it helps us decide and take the information that comes from these committees as objective. And if we're asking them to always meet with the developer, then I'm starting to wonder how objective it is.
We're not asking them to meet with the developer.
Right.
They're asking to meet with the developer.
You shouldn't be, that's why I'm saying this.
Yes, please.
Peter Bottomley, Vice Chair of ProStack. I just want to add that, it was ProStack's understanding that there is a looming deadline, I believe is somewhere like December 1st, that the board has to decide with the developer, because you changed the agreement that the developer has a say in parcel 3 now, that if there's going to be that 80-20 split, that ProStack is supposed to agree with the developer as to what is going to go forward to the board. So ProStack can't understand, what the developer is, what's essential to the developer, how that matches up with the design concepts plan unless we discuss with the developer. So we need to get some feedback from the developer as to what is essential to him, how it matches up with design concepts. We're not looking to change our recommendation at this time. We're just trying to get a better understanding so that he doesn't submit an FDP like he did with Parcel 4 that's completely different than the design concepts plan, and we end up in this huge mess of a board meeting where there's conflicting ideas and there's no agreement, and then you kick it back to ProStack, and we have to hold a last-minute meeting, and then everyone's unhappy. We're trying to be proactive in avoiding a situation like that. So
Is there a looming deadline on parcel 3?
it was like 6 months from the May 27th meeting, I believe.
There's deadline for indoor space, which is October 1st. And then there was, because they had the parcel included in their FDP, but they took that out. So
there's
I'm not sure what their time frame is.
There's no parcel 3 in any FDP, so I don't believe there's.
It'll come back as a separate FDP.
Right. Well, we're just trying to get ahead of it, essentially, and so that's out. There's nothing suspicious. The developer being there isn't biasing ProStack. We're just looking to get as much information as we can and as much understanding as we can as to the differences between concept A from the developer and the approved, the recommended design concepts plan that OSAC and ProStack have.
Would you find it useful to have design concepts there as well?
Well, that's really a budgetary issue, I believe, for the town.
We were told it was not a budgetary issue.
I mean, the design concepts plan isn't changing on Wednesday night. So to have them there, I think it would be more of a formality. I mean, ProStack understands, OSAC understands what the design concepts plan is. We're not deviating from that in any concrete fashion. So to have them there, I don't know that it would be essential. I mean, it would be nice, but I think my understanding is that we're past budget with their involvement.
I respect what you're saying, Peter, but I would also say that the developer's Plan A is very well detailed on paper as well. So you can take the detail on Plan A from the developer and the design concepts plan and compare them as a committee. I think what Chairwoman Tedeschi said is should we be put in a position of having the developer in front of us as a committee or not? So
without him there to answer questions, we can't understand, what's more important to him, a disc golf or a basketball court? The things like that are.
And you feel you can interpret that from design concepts plan?
We can't really interpret that from a piece of paper. I mean, if he's going to come in and say concept A is it, I don't want to change it, then yeah, I mean, I guess it's cut and dry. But if he's going to sit down and say, of these 5 things, these 3 are essential, then that's what we need to understand.
I'm not going to dog this further, but one point. If he says, well, we could move that basketball court over here where design concepts had the playground, So when he says we could move it over here without design concepts there, you can't get their opinion on what impact that has on their overall plan. So to me, either both should be there or neither should be there. So, having said that,
To me, it's an initial discussion. So what you're saying is, maybe he wants to amend his concept A after Wednesday night, then maybe design concepts comes back and looks at that. I don't know.
But
we're not
It
looking.
would be most efficient to have all parties in the room at the same time.
Okay.
Then you guys are already overtasked. You've got a full agenda for the rest of the year. That's why I believe it's worth discussion at the board level, possibly at hopefully an upcoming retreat, as to how to provide direction on what we want, what's left that we want your guys' opinion on, and then how would we proceed given the fact that 3 committees have now voted or weighed in on these parcels. So we've got to take the broad picture into account.
Can I kind of reword our discussion a little bit? Maybe the actual issue here is who bargains with the developer? Do our committees bargain with the developer, or does the town board trustees bargain with the developer? So I think that may be the bigger issue. That should we put you in that?
I think it's overstating that we're bargaining with the developer. We're asking questions of the developer. We're not in any concrete fashion saying, if you move this here, we're good with that. I mean, that might be the end result, down the road, so it's less contentious, that we could possibly change a recommendation. But we're not going in there with the idea that we would do that. And I don't think we're saying we're bargaining with the developer or negotiating with the developer. We're discussing with the developer.
We're trying to help the board. And yes, we do this all the time. I mean, we've looked at these plans for months. And so we can look at the plans and we can talk about what might work, what might not work. Hey, trust me, if as a board you want to do that, you want to take what we've submitted and say, thank you, ProStack, you guys are done. We're going to work this out with the developer when they submit their plan. Great, do it. And we can cancel our meeting, and then, we can, if you have further direction from us, that's fine with us. So all we're trying to do is say, well, this is what we were told to do, and we were told and directed to do this by the board from what I was told from town staff, and that's what we're trying to do. And so yes, if we come up with a compromise plan, it's a non-binding recommendation. You don't have to accept it, but we're trying to do that work for you and to help you. But if you don't want us to do it, great. Just say, no more ProStack, thank you, we've got these plans, we'll take it from here, and I'm sure we'll be fine with that.
Okay, we do need to wrap this up since we're in the board comment section here, but.
So I do want to just quickly iterate. I think everybody respects the work that ProStack's been doing. I think the fine line, as Debbie has said, and I think what I've been trying to purport here, is I don't think that the committees, and I would again ask the question that hasn't been answered, are we chartered with negotiating? We're not. I don't think we should be ever in the same room trying to create consensus with the other side of an agreement with the town. I do believe that lies in the purview of the board, and we should not be doing that. We should be giving you unbiased, which means exclusive of the other party's decisions on what we think is appropriate. And we're making this really gray, and this process has been difficult from the beginning. And what it's doing is it's pitting volunteers against volunteers. It's making us sound like we're being disrespectful to each other, and we are not. And I'm super, super, super tired of feeling like I'm being pitted against ProStack, because that is how I'm being made to feel. It may not be the intent, but it's being how I'm made to feel. And I just have to personally put that on the record, that I really think you guys have to own negotiations and decisions. We only give you unbiased recommendations.
Okay, so.
And I'm going to make one more comment.
Okay, but we
in
really
all
have
my
to start
years,
moving on.
I'm sorry, but in all my years of being on committees, and I've been on OSAC and any other committee in the past, I've never had a developer come in and give a presentation to us. We've had design concepts, we've had Greenplay come in, which is fine, but I've never been privy to that. And I'm not so sure if I were on the committee I would appreciate that. So that's my thoughts on that. We've never done it before. I don't think we should be continuing down this path.
Okay, so my strong recommendation is whatever the committees feel like they need to do, they should feel empowered to do that. So if they feel like they need to meet with them, great. If they don't feel like they need to meet with them, great. This is the committee's job to do. So I'm just going to leave it like that.
Committees are empowered to negotiate?
No, that's obviously not the discussion that we've had. So we're going to move on, and unless people feel strongly otherwise, then I'm assuming that they're going to, whatever they feel is important to do, they should do that.
Andrew, I'm going to disagree with you. I think that's the function of a work plan. When we did the advisory committee rewrite, we explicitly included work plans, so there was prior approval from the board. And so I do want to expressly disagree with you. I'd like this to be brought up in a retreat so we can discuss
I think
it
that would
further.
be fantastic. I think it would be a great conversation in our retreat. Fully support that. Mr. Magley.
Can I just one more?
Yep.
We've had recommendations, overall recommendations. I would expect there should be time at the submission of every final development plan for that plan to be sent to each of the committees that are relevant to the plan, for them to comment on that final development plan. And if the plan is somewhat different than the earlier recommendation, they're free to change their earlier recommendation and what they're making to us. But again, it's all recommendations to us. I was at the meeting in May. I think the meeting in June was where we had discussion about trying to resolve differences and...
Parcels 4 and...
And I was not at that meeting, but there was definitely talk of asking ProStack and the committees to get with the developer. And I can't be precise on what they were asked to do. I expect the committees to operate independently. I expect you guys, Chairperson Tedeschi, give us your recommendations. Do not expect you to negotiate with developers. I expect the development plan to come to us with your recommendations. I expect the development plan to have the input of staff on what the developer is submitting and how it meets prior plans, and to the extent possible, staff trying to get the development plan in line with what they think we want to do as a town. And then it's up to us to vote and decide and negotiate with the developer if necessary in our hearing. But I don't know if that clarified anything, but that's your work on each of those final development plans that are still to come forward is not done. We're going to, hopefully you will have time to look at each one of those and give us a recommendation as it pertains to your area. And that, of course, goes for the Planning Commission as well and Historical Commission.
Okay. Anything else?
So
Trustee
based
Bennett?
on what you said, I understand what you say.
I don't think we should be sending them back to work with the developer. I think that's something, if we needed that to happen, we should have talked to staff about doing that.
So we own that mistake.
We own that mistake.
So I'm going to fundamentally 100% disagree with that, because if the committees feel like they can come up with version number 3 that most people are happy with, I'd love to see that. Doesn't mean I'm going to vote for it, but I'd love to see all the options. You know, when we have developer proposal, committee proposal, trying to work that out in the middle of a hearing, that's nearly impossible. So.
Agree to disagree.
Okay, let's move on.
Agree on that one. I'll agree to disagree.
All right, Mr. Magley.
A couple of follow-up items for the board. One is I gave the board the maintenance costs for the dog park at Autry Park. And then Alex was successful in getting the contractor to move the 25-mile-an-hour zone from McCaslin further north. It was done a couple weeks ago.
Thank you.
Okay, Town Attorney.
I have nothing to pass along to Kendra.
Okay. Town Clerk. Thank you very much. That brings us to 5, public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items. Going once, going...
I guess I don't know what the action item is.
We didn't hear you, Sharon.
So she, just to reiterate the question, she isn't sure how to proceed,
So I
given
guess I
the
don't
board's direction.
understand where we are in terms of a meeting on Wednesday night, meeting with the developer where the committees could be biased by the developer's decision. Because I think we all know when you go into consensus meetings, you split the baby. And I think it's your job to decide how to split that baby without us giving you additional now biased or potentially biased opinions.
Okay, so let's vote on this just to be done with it. So I'll entertain a motion. Anybody?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the PROSTAC meeting to proceed as planned on Wednesday.
Motion by Trustee Hansen, second by Mayor Muckles. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Hansen, Strelly, Muckle, opposed? Williams and Pennington. Okay, I think we're clear. Any other public comment? With that, presentations, and tonight we have the Chamber. Thank you very much for coming again.
Good evening, Board. Heather Craycraft with the Superior Chamber of Commerce. And it is the best time of year in our small community that we get to host one of the most fun events, really, of the year for both the Chamber and the community as a whole. And thank you, first of all, to you and to staff to continue our Chili Fest, which is a short few weeks away. This is the 14th annual Chili Fest that is, in words of one of our restaurant competitors, their favorite day of the year. I just wanted to give this opportunity to just do a little plug for the event. It's obviously an event many of you have attended over the many years that it has been here, but this year really is taking it to a new level. I think the event planner for your staff, Katie, has each year taken the challenge of making it a bigger and a better event, and this year has definitely done so with the cooperation of Boulder Valley Rotary Club in bringing the Boulder Valley Beer Fest to our event. So it's 2 great events, one great location on Saturday, September 6th from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. at Community Park. There are no conflicts as far as any local football teams, so that's good news for anyone. We all might have younger kids playing sports, but if you can join us for a lot of great food, music, and a lot of friends, we're excited to welcome back the local bands from Global Sound Studios. Those are kid bands that are really impressive, to be honest, and are making quite a tour of the events through the summer and coming to ours to open the stage. And then we'll be followed by Face, the vocal band, if any of you have heard from them. We are putting a call out for chili cooks. If anyone is interested in competing in our chili cook-off, it is a fantastic event and serious business. And then we are still looking for some restaurants and local caterers if anyone is also wants to compete for our annual People's Choice. So I just wanted to put a shout out, and if anyone has any questions, all the information can be found on the town's website.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right, with that, we move on to the consent agenda, and on the consent agenda this evening is approval of the minutes of the July 28th Board of Trustees meetings, acceptance of the meeting notes for the Historical Commission and the Recycling and Conservation Advisory Committee, approval of a liquor license approval for Rock Creek Wine and Spirits, approval of a liquor license approval for Del Vecchio's Restaurant, approval of an application for alcohol on public property, and adoption of a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement with the Boulder County Clerk and Recorder for the conduct of and administration of the 2014 general election. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Trustee Strelly, second by Trustee Hansen. Discussion. Are we spending money with the clerk?
Yes.
Yes, that's what I thought, so.
Strelly?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Muckle?
Yes.
Pennington?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. That motion carries. That brings us to item number 8, PROSTAC Indoor Survey Review. Mr. Magley.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, there's a presentation by the committee and staff on the proposed indoor facility survey and recreation needs for the community. My staff, the consultants, the committee, certain board members have all put a lot of time into this and provided input on the questions, and a lot of hard work's gone into it. So this is the final step where the board gets one last look at it before it goes out to the committee, and just to see if there's any hopefully minor changes to the survey before it goes out. With that, Patrick.
Good evening, Patrick Hammertown staff. With me tonight I have Chris Cares from RRC Associates. I also have several members of ProStack who participated in the working group: Jim Payne, Peter Bottomley, Jeff Isaacson, Sandy Hammerly. We also had 2 trustees as part of a working group to help put this process together, Trustee Pennington and Trustee Hanson. We came with a draft survey to the board on June 9th, collected a significant amount of feedback from other members of ProStack, incorporated feedback from the board, worked on the survey process, and the work group, Chris Cares and staff, is available to answer questions about the survey questions themselves or the distribution process as you see fit.
Great, thank you very much. Should we, we've seen it all, should we, should we go through it by, unless there's anything else? Do you want to go through it page by page, just in case people have any questions, and then we could just move on? Does that sound fair?
Yeah, sure. As you know, the survey's in a digital format. It was edited in a digital format, and we'll kind of just scroll through page by page. And if anything jumps out or you have specific questions, please feel free to stop us and call up the appropriate people to answer. Started off with just basic kind of mapping questions, trying to understand where people are living, identifying the basics, age ranges in the households, jumping into the questions considering nearby options, in or near Superior. How well do you think the following facilities currently meet your needs? We've consistently kind of gone through. As you'll see from previous discussions, we've added more of the open space and parks type questions to allow the citizens to weigh in on all those options as well. So natural open space, trails, dog park, outdoor aquatics facilities, park lawns, landscaping, playgrounds. So those were in addition, outdoor fields, those were in addition to the indoor specific questions in the previous iteration.
Are we asking questions as we go through each one?
If you have a question, yeah.
So just again, I'll restate that I think that this survey should really stick to indoor space only, but if everybody else feels that we need to include outdoor facilities, then fine. But if you back up to right there, so we've got outdoor courts and outdoor fields. Go down just a little bit more. So on the outdoor courts, you're asking for how satisfied they are with outdoor courts, and examples are tennis and basketball. With the fields, we're saying outdoor field facilities, multi-purpose, baseball, softball. To me, if you feel like there's enough baseball and softball fields, but not nearly enough multi-purpose fields, the answer to that question could be swayed. I think you need to break those out. I know I'm asking for fewer questions, but here in this case I'm actually saying break it out a little bit more, and the same thing with outdoor courts. You could feel that we have enough tennis courts, but not nearly enough basketball courts, so perhaps we want to break those out as well and get a little bit more detail on what is desired in town.
You'll note several open-ended question opportunities.
And Patrick, Chris Cares with RRC. My point would be, we did intend that if someone wanted to divide outdoor, for example, and provide additional clarification, that's what question 6 is for. Gives you the opportunity to say, I really think that there's too little of this and enough of that. But I think if your direction is to add these questions, we can take a look at it.
Yeah, I think that I'm a good example of it. And unfortunately, a lot of these questions where you're asking for more specific detail, frankly, I'm not going to do it. I might say, I'm happy with the survey. but I may not go into detail about the courts and about the fields. So I think you're going to get that with a lot of individuals. They're not going to spend the extra time to go into a lot of dialogue, especially as the survey goes on with 40 questions. I think that the later, I mean, it's good, I guess, that this is in the beginning of the survey, but if this were at the end of the survey, I think people would shut down and say, I'm not going to answer any more lengthy questions.
I would agree with Chris, particularly on the outdoor field facilities, parens, multi-purpose baseball and softball. Baseball and softball have a unique population interested in them, and lumping it into that particular question may yield sort of unuseful results. So I think maybe a little more thought needs to be put into that one.
So, Mayor, just a process question. Do you want, as these issues come up, do you want us to take notes and just address them all at the end, or do you want to?
Yes, I think that'd be great. And hopefully, the subcommittee, after this discussion this evening, the subcommittee can get together and just finalize that. Hopefully, it doesn't have to come back before the board again.
Your timing on sending it out?
Yeah, we actually have a postcard ready and in queue to be sent to the residents as soon as we have a survey that everybody agrees on. And having spoken with the consultant, minor changes like that, I think, can easily be incorporated.
I also would like to agree with Trustee Hansen that I saw this as an indoor survey, not as an outdoor survey. And having worked really closely with this group, which has done a stellar job, adding these outdoor amenities into it has bogged it down. And Chris points out a case in point. So I would be fine getting rid of it entirely.
I would too.
And, but that, we're missing a couple of people here who wanted more outdoor information. I think Lisa was one of them, Nelia was another. So they're just not here today. So, Joe, you're nodding your head.
My one overall comment was that I didn't want to see outdoor mixed into this, and I thought I just lost that argument a long time ago. But this was an indoor survey, and so why we're looking at outdoor.
So whatever the board's pleasure is, I think it'd be very helpful to get this survey back and have a pretty inclusive thing when we're talking about especially the town center, so that we actually know what we're supposed to be looking at in there. But once again, whatever the board's pleasure is.
Okay. So just so I can clarify and make sure that Chris, and is the direction at this point, would you like us to consider?
Let's why don't we go through that, and we'll have that just as a specific discussion point.
As you move through question 7 through 14, we briefly start to touch on indoor spaces, areas that could be added, expanded, improved, and superior over the next 5 to 10 years. Again, you'll see kind of the rating system. The group worked very hard to kind of identify age-specific facilities, opportunity for some open-ended questions. We moved down into community meeting rooms. There have been several conversations about appropriateness of size, 60-person dividable community room, 25-person classroom study rooms, event and performance space. Athletic and dance facilities, quite a bit of work went into identifying what those are. These are specific indoor facilities, touching on indoor turf field, ice rink, climbing walls, jogging tracks, things that would typically be found in a indoor recreational facility.
Patrick, one more time. I know that the working group discussed this, but indoor ice rink, is that going to be confusing at all with, and I forget what the group said about this, but is that going to be confusing with when Boulder Valley Ice finally gets going? Aren't they going to say, well, it's not or it's very important, or no, it's not important because there's already one going in, or, I mean, is that necessary?
In the intro to the question, the wording that the group decided on was please do not be influenced by any information that you may be aware of regarding potential amenities in town center. So I think there was an effort to try to separate the two, so there was an opportunity
Could
for
we
an unbiased
clarify it
opinion.
by saying public indoor ice rink?
I think that those word changes are very easy to make. So, you know, there's been specific conversations about indoor aquatic facilities. This would give the participant the opportunity to weigh in on things like competitive pool, leisure lap pools, leisure pools, no lap lanes, and others. Aquatics continues to come up. This is a good opportunity to get that question out there. As you see here, question 15 is more of a priority question. It's not all that visible here. This question allows you to drag and drop your priorities into an order. Allows you to move them back. Allows you, once they're in this column, to reorganize those priorities. The group also felt strongly about adding an opportunity to remind people to make sure that this is prioritized the way that they really want it.
Patrick, if you go up to the lead-in, that's awfully long to the eye. On the third line, on the right in order of importance, period, can we insert a return there? So the question is
Not as
highlighted
daunting.
Yeah, right
and
there.
doesn't run into the rest?
Yep.
Okay.
Again, specific indoor amenity type questions. Question, if you do not think Superior needs additional indoor amenities, gives the person the opportunity to check that as well.
And when they click that, then do they skip ahead multiple questions?
Well, if they say clicking that in lieu of answering 7 through 16.
If you do not think, again, up here in the intro, maybe this needs to be broken out a little bit differently. If you do not think that Superior needs additional indoor amenities, please skip. It allows you to kind of bypass this one over.
Okay.
Briefly touching on location, potential location for indoor facility. Move into the library-based questions. The group's spent a considerable amount of time working on library questions and what's too much info, what's appropriate info, what's not appropriate info. Briefly touches on the relationship with Louisville, asking if they're aware of it. How well does the relationship meet your current library needs? How often is that used? Frequently, occasionally, not at all. Opportunity for additional comments. Do we need any type of library located in Superior? Opportunity there for open-ended. Again, just thinking about public and private indoor facilities available in or near Superior. How satisfied is the household? And I'll ask if the group wants to clarify. I think this gives the participant the opportunity to comment on if they're a user of Lakeshore, Louisville, or another potential facility that's close in proximity that would be accommodating their needs currently.
Patrick, can we go back to library? What happened to that list of specific library amenities? It's not on our printout. No. Or did I miss it?
You have to select.
Yeah, select. It's drop down. Yeah. So
on 24, is it, where you click yes?
There we go.
So if you
There it
see,
is.
yeah, we don't have that in our packet.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I remember answering.
As long as you kept it in, I'm
Mhm.
happy.
That's only if you answer yes.
Yes.
That was, as the group and staff noticed, working with the consultant, editing a document with drop-downs is quite the challenge, and trying to do a red line version became too complicated and almost impossible to work with. Again, opportunities to to make comments. Opportunities to discuss how important is it for the town to address the needs for groups. Pretty specific to indoor. Briefly touching on a potential partnership with Louisville, whether that be some kind of process where Superior residents have access to Louisville facilities. You can see kind of the listing of possible answers here.
I'm going to reiterate on number 30 what I did say to the committee. When we, on line 3, after we asked the question, would you support a partnership agreement with the City of Louisville in which residents of Superior and Louisville would have reciprocal access to indoor community rec facilities located within each community? When we add that note, we're potentially biasing the answer. So I would drop that note out. I think the question is self-explanatory. I don't think you need the explanation. And I think the explanation actually biases the potential, or potentially biases the results.
It's the note right after.
Third line at the end, more new amenities and lower parks and recreation costs.
I agree with that, Sandy.
Fewer of those new amenities. I think get rid of that. Yeah. It just complicates and it doesn't add anything meaningful to me.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple additional questions, gleaning information about use of public or private facilities. Asking the question about use of public indoor recreational facilities if were to be constructed in Superior. Hop into financial questions. This question in some form has been around since the earliest an iteration of the survey. It's kind of the how would you spend the $100, being able to break it down percentage-wise. This question has the outdoor facilities, including field courts, open lands, parks, trails, and then indoor as well, with a split.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll check the format there. I think indoor should be decided.
What Chris Cares is referring to is this line here is dropped down. It's been fixed a couple of times, and we'll have that moved back up before the survey goes out.
Are these choices of answers rotating still, or are they fixed? Like, is dog park always at the top, or does it rotate?
Depends on 35, it's not rotating. And 34, it's not either. I mean, the order there stays the same.
Can you repeat what he said?
Yeah.
Looks alphabetical.
This list here, previous lists will automatically rotate themselves as to not have a bias. Somebody may open it up and it may specifically have jogging track at the top. Then the survey would be opened again and it would have library at the top. So there was no placement. It's randomized. Where here on the financial questions, because this is a set list and the activity is actually taking place in these small fields, this is static here on this side.
You know that there is going to be bias because of placement on this question. People, because it's a long list, people won't make it to the bottom. There's a bias to put your answers towards the top. So can it be made rotating?
To be honest, I'm not sure that this can with the dollar increments put into it. It creates a really difficult analytical problem at the other end.
If it cannot, with the exception of the word other, I would put the rest in alphabetical order so that it looks like it's got some sort of random.
Okay.
Otherwise, it looks like you're favoring dog parks, so you put it at the top.
It is alphabetical.
Not exactly, but somewhat.
Are you outdoors out of place?
Could be aquatic, comma, outdoor.
Yeah, you could.
Right. As I'm hearing from some of the group behind is things like dog park will still inevitably be at the top, but we can discuss with the consultant on maybe another way to have this list kind of populate itself.
Right. Are there any others? Chris Cares, I'm directing this to you. Are there any others that are not rotating that I'd sort of like to know, because on other non-rotating lists, you're going to have that same problem.
I think that in the end, we elected not to rotate some of the other ones. So because of the length, and again, the complexity of combining them, like the long question with indoor, where we categorized it into subcategories. We talked about that fairly extensively.
Oh, well, those are in subcategories in the question.
Right.
Like number 7, age-specific indoor facilities with a short list. There's going to be less potential for bias just because the list is short. You can see it all with your eye, one eye, with one glance. It's the long list that I have less of a problem with 7 and 9. Start to have a problem with 11 because it does get long. You got 10 items there. But it'll be fine. 13 is okay. But any long list, for example, number 15, where you've got 20 items in there.
Yeah, 15 is rotating.
Okay.
I made a suggestion was just made by one of the committee members that what we could potentially do is stagger indoor, outdoor, indoor, outdoor, indoor, outdoor. At least that way it would keep anything starting with an O from lumping together. So we could work to have indoor amenity, indoor, outdoor.
Okay.
At least to mix that list up a little bit, specific to that question.
Because number 35 would also have that same issue.
Right.
So just give me a second.
Yeah, that's the one we were on, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
Question.
But it does, and I hope we can rotate it even.
No, it wasn't the number we were on, but.
Yeah.
So what we could potentially do is start to do outdoor, indoor, outdoor, indoor, outdoor, and work on the stagger that way if there's not another solution out there to make this a rotating list and still be able to accomplish the question.
It almost has to be rotating. I can't really see it working any other way. But even on a rotating question, you've got to, is it going to be rotating every time somebody clicks in to take the survey?
That's my understanding,
Okay.
correct?
Yeah, that's good.
I'm sorry,
What do you-
Trustee
what do you mean by that?
specific to question 35 or on the questions previous?
All of them. Do you mean, what's the issue with rotating?
Yeah, so explain, I guess I don't
On a
understand.
long list, when you do a survey, whatever's at the top tends to be answered,
Okay, first, or,
tends to be included in the answer more than what's ever at the
Yeah.
bottom. So, for example, if I don't know what's at the bottom of this list.
Other.
Trails, parks, outdoor field and whatnot.
Okay.
Which, interestingly, outdoor things are clumped at the bottom. Trails, parks, outdoor, natural open space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 outdoor items are at the bottom of the list. So if those are not rotated, and I get these results back, I'm going to say, of course, they didn't get as much money allocation because they're always at the bottom of the list, and people don't.
oh, so you're saying if you take the survey they're going to be in a different order than if I take the survey,
Right.
not if I
So-
log in.
So there
Okay,
is
gotcha.
no
Yep.
placement bias
Got
in
it.
this
Okay.
thing.
And that, so that's the preference anywhere we can do it. I was saying that on this particular one, where we have what is in effect an open-ended question with, where somebody puts a dollar amount, and those dollar amounts vary, it's a challenging one to have it be able to rotate. So my comment will be, if you'll let the committee look at it, is we will do one of two things. If we can rotate it, we will. If we can't, we'll find a way to order it so it's got some alphabetical component and a logical mix of indoor-outdoor. Is that fair?
I'm having trouble understanding why you have difficulty with this, but since I'm on the committee, I shall provide that input to you via the committee.
That's fine. Thank you.
We get kind of down to the bottom of this
Yeah,
page.
question about 37.
Sure.
So the only way that we could raise taxes, it has to go to a vote, because, and this is a question for town manager and the attorney, that this is due to Tabor, correct?
Right, yeah.
On sales tax, is there a maximum amount of sales tax that the state will allow anyone to charge?
They used to have a cap, but it's been removed. There's no cap. But, I mean, there's no restriction through the state, but at some point, your sales tax could get so high that nobody's
No
going
one
to
will
shop
shop.
in your town.
But the state doesn't
No.
demand that you can only charge up to a certain amount? Okay. Okay.
I would like people's opinion on that that extra information at the end of the question, which, again, I would perhaps put on a separate line. I would probably put a return right there after the purpose question mark. But I care less than I did on that other question. I believe we need to put into perspective for the typical resident what an answer of 1 to 49 or 50 to 99 means. I think my preference was actually to use the 1.5 mill levy on the library question, that if you had a certain value of home, a $200,000 home, your library services would be assessed to your house at X number of dollars. So they could identify just what the library services meant to them. So, for example, a $400,000 home pays $60 a year for library services. And that was a short and sweet example. A $200,000 home pays $30 a year for library services, whether or not you use them. And that allows, to me, a sort of short and quick way to put this in perspective. So if you wanted to originally answer $1 to $49, and you know that, heck, you're paying $60 just for Louisville library services, which you don't use, it would cause you to say, if I want a whole town center indoor recreation facility, I probably should up that beyond that, the $60 I pay just for library services I don't use. Anyway, so that is probably my preference, is to use that as the example, because it's easy. If you have an $800,000 home, it's $120 a year. To me, this gets a little more obtuse. So $400,000 pays annual property taxes of just under $3,400, of which only approximately $300 goes to the town of Superior. So I'm going to have to think a little bit about what that means to me, and do some math, and figure out the equation so that I can fill my little dot in. It seems to me to be difficult.
I agree that I stumbled here too. I didn't understand
Why that was being
$15,
supplied.
what is that really going to get me? I don't know. But I do remember the last big survey where there was the example of mill levy. And several of us neighbors got together trying to figure out what mill levy meant and all that, calculating. So that's a tough one to do, even if you start, especially if you start mentioning mill levies.
You don't even have to use the word mill levy. You could say a current home, a home assessed at $200,000 pays roughly $30 for library services. A $400,000 home, $60 a year. An $800,000 home, $120 a year. You could just have that without ever mentioning that confusing phrase, mill levy. So I like simpler rather than more complex there as that.
And actually, when I read the question, I wondered why you even had any kind of comparison whatsoever. Because, I mean, obviously, this comparison to me meant a little something more to me than the average Joe would understand. But I didn't think it related to the question. I mean, am I willing to pay $50 more for indoor facilities? Or am I willing to pay $100? I mean, that's my answer in a nutshell. I don't care how much more mill levies there are, how much more sales tax. I am ignorant, not me, but I mean, in general, if I'm not, an elected official, I don't really care about all that. I just want to know how much is the bottom line for me.
May I? Jim Payne, former member of ProStack, and I continued as the project leader on this. There probably, other than the library, there are a few questions in the survey that we spent more time on. Lots of people have looked at this survey. Lots of people, I think it's fair to say, felt that this was a simpler way to do it. I know everybody might have their own version of what seems simple. I know you like the library analogy, but it doesn't strike other people as simply as it does you. So we were asked by the board to work something like this in, and after all the work and all the people who've taken the survey and tested it, this seemed to be the best approach. Everybody liked this. As far as taking that whole thing out, we really weren't pushing to have that in the first place. That sort of was an attempt to meet some of the desires of certain board members, not even
If you don't have
board
that
direction.
in though, if you don't have some reference point
Right.
then I, as a trustee who's looking at the results of this survey, am going to have to throw this question entirely out.
Well, everyone's going to throw some questions out, and I caution people against doing that, because some questions that you think may give us reams of fabulous data may not work, and others will. That happens in any survey, and you're always free to do that. But we feel that this is actually, there's a good piece of news in there that really gets people cuts right. I mean, I've showed that to a lot of people. Everybody's just absolutely pulled over by that. So I think that does give it some perspective.
The problem with that, Jim, to me, is that, so does let's say I mark $1 to $49. Let's say I'm comfortable with $49. Does that $49 go towards the $3,400, or does it go to the $300?
It's almost insignificant. It's almost, the point is, how much more would you be willing to pay? That could be in sales tax, it could be in property tax,
Right.
It could be in any one of a number of ways. I mean, there's no way to get into that without getting so complicated.
But really, the answer is it goes to the $3,400. If I say I'm willing to pay $49 more, it goes to the $49, because that's my total tax assessment.
Yeah, but it's saying how much more would you be willing to pay? $49? That's asking me, am I willing to pay $49 for this amenity? Not saying.
Well, that's where I'm going with this,
Yeah.
Chris, that it seems to be ambiguous then with that example.
Yeah, to me, that doesn't really matter to me, that $300 of my $3,400 is going to the town.
Interesting trivia, but not
I just
here.
say take that out, that it's asking how much I'm willing to pay. I'm saying I'm willing to pay $100.
Well, I don't disagree with you. We're fine with taking the whole thing out, and but the board gave us quite clear, I don't think it was direction, but the members of, some of you gave us quite clear direction that you wanted some indicator like that in here. I heard it said from the dais that if there's not a benchmark like that, I mean, you're essentially saying that now.
If I am saying that.
We're not
but
crazy
because I don't believe this accomplishes what its intent is, I would take it out as well. If I had my
The whole
perfect.
question or just that
No,
section?
that last part.
And I think that the question needs to be just pure and simple. How much more annually are you willing to pay to have these indoor services?
Or how much would you be
$50?
willing to pay?
How much more are you willing to
Yeah,
pay?
how
I'm
much
willing to pay $100 more, or whatever it
would you be
is.
willing to pay in property tax and/or sales tax to have this, or
I mean, this is
more
one of
in
those
tax?
questions that grew as different people and different, functions sort of gave us different words they thought should be in there. So we're fine with
Taking it out?
simplifying it.
So we'll come back to this in the general discussion? Or
Well, do you need to? I mean, we'll simplify it. We
Yeah,
get the
we're-
point. I mean, we,
I'm just making.
Let's just-
suggestions.
yeah, no,
Come back and
let's-
discuss all these, so.
Yeah, that's fine, just keep going, we'll come back to them.
thanks.
Thanks, Jim. And just to kind of wrap up, just more kind of clarifying demographic questions, pretty basic.
Just, I don't have strong feelings about this one or the other, but what's the importance of designating a race? Does that change your interest in particular recreational things? Just a question.
Right, and so originally, we didn't have any of this. We had, it came from, we added it in, and in the committee after, with a couple of, for a couple of reasons. One reason is we want the ability to go back and be able to match our respondents up with the demographic census data, so we know what we have, and can do the weighting and so forth if it's necessary. The other reason is that we have, according to the 2010 census, we do have sizable differences. We have 14% Asian population, which is a grouping of a lot of different people, but we do have substantial demographic groups within the town. And so we felt it would be good to understand that. The other question, where was the?
Jim, why do you, so 40 and 41, why wouldn't you put Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin in 40?
Okay, because that is coming out of current census trends and what the U.S. Census is doing. Because not all, matter of fact, there's quite a big issue nationally in demographic circles where people of Hispanic origin are beginning to define themselves in different ways. So you've got, it's a different category than asking racial. It's not a racial question, it's an ethnicity question. And that's just following U.S. Census data protocol. Chris, did I say that correctly? Yeah. Okay.
Do you like the dogs question?
So, you wanna?
So that's it, right? So do you have the list?
And I'll
Yep.
ask Chris, sure, bring up anything I forgot, I'm just gonna start at the top.
So Chris, we're not doing the gift, right?
I'm sorry?
We're not doing the raffle for it.
No, we're not
Great.
doing the raffle.
Okay, that's a good decision.
The first question that came up in your review, which affects the whole survey potentially, is should outdoor facility questions be included in the survey?
Well, I'd be happy to weigh in because I'm the only one that hasn't, because I was not around during this whole discussion, and I appreciate everyone's input and time on this, so I didn't have to. No, I'm just kidding. I was one of the ones that wanted indoor and outdoor. I didn't feel it had to be in the same survey, though. And I kind of, like Joe, gave up that we're never going to do a separate survey that's for outdoor. So I would like clarification, are we ever going to do an outdoor survey? Because I think that's some information that needs to be brought forth to the board in order to make an informed decision going forward in what amenities, outdoor amenities, are necessary as well as indoor amenities. I knew we needed the indoor survey, and we approved that at budget, and I'm on board with that. So I guess I would give up that outdoor information in this survey if I had an idea of where we were going to get that input.
We're planning on any more surveys this year, but it doesn't mean we can't do. We're planning a community-wide survey next year, just on general town services, but you know, we can include questions in that, or do a separate survey, or you can include it in this one.
Why wouldn't we ask ProStack that when they start their planning process for next year or several years out? Consider this, and if you think that this is something we should do, then put it in your work plan.
Another survey, an indoor or outdoor survey.
Yeah.
Because we work so darn hard to incorporate this into here, to unincorporate it is going to be a huge amount of work.
And I wouldn't really.
So I say leave it. So
I would recommend leaving it because it's not really an outdoor survey because that would have to have much more detail.
I just need a clarification on outdoor field facilities.
Break it out, you mean?
And go with it.
Right, it would be not impossible, but we would not get this out for quite some time. And it would upset the balance. Now, so it's clear, when we had the discussion about adding indoor, it did make sense, even within an indoor survey, for some benchmarks of comparisons to get people's feelings relatively, to have some outdoor. So we worked in this outdoor, and it took a lot of work and a lot of time to do it. But I think it's important to understand what you're going to get. You will get a good reading from this survey on the citizens' needs, perceived needs for indoor. You're not going to get the same kind of feedback for outdoor. You'll get some important information, but that's why I'm a little concerned about going that next step. And you'd asked to break out fields in some way, and I can't, which we did.
Fields and courts, yeah.
I would be reluctant to go further because it's going to suggest a potential outcome from the survey influencing outdoor decisions that really won't be there, really won't be justified.
Because there's
and
not
at some
enough.
point you're not.
Okay.
It's one of the things we face with the library questions. You need to be fair to the constituents for those facilities. So if you're not going to do it the right way in a survey that's really designed to get at those answers for outdoor, you need to be careful because you could legitimately upset people who feel the survey really didn't represent their interests or ask the question that they would have asked.
So Jim,
if
you just, under outdoor field facilities, do multi-purpose, soccer, baseball, parens, so that you don't seem to be weighting it to baseball and softball in the answer. So multi-purpose, soccer, baseball, that would satisfy me. Chris, would it satisfy you?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't see any issue with that.
Is the rest of the board okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're
And then-
including soccer in that question?
Multi-purpose, soccer, baseball, drop the softball, and then baseball is just one of several.
Okay.
Why do we have to call out the specific amenities all? Why don't we just say fields? I mean, because you're eliminating football.
Well, a baseball field is not generic to multi-purpose, where soccer, softball, they're unique.
Or just
Otherwise-
fields.
Well, why wouldn't you just say multi-purpose, baseball? Why? Because soccer would be played.
We get the direction, we'll fix it.
Jim,
If we're-
to answer
we could
Deborah's, why can't you just say outdoor field facilities?
That's the way it started.
Okay.
And then through committee,
Well, sometimes committees make a horse into a
No, I don't
camel,
even mean
right?
committees.
So
I
maybe
mean
we
through
did
board and
that.
everything else. This is what happens, which is fine and understandable, but that's how it got there, and there's some reason for it, so.
Well,
We're all in favor of simplifying it if the board wants us to do that.
I would do outdoor fields, just
Does that satisfy you, Chris? Because you...
I would leave it the way it is. I think that we're trying to monkey with too much, and I agree. Your explanation was good. Just leave it the way it is.
Right. I don't think we're dealing with huge differences that are going to have a
Right.
big impact, so...
Okay.
Same with the question for tennis courts, basketball courts.
Yes.
Leave it the way it
Yes.
is.
For the record, I would do multipurpose, soccer, baseball, and a slight modification.
Next one I had was add public to indoor ice facility question. So it's public indoor ice facility, just for clarification. Sir,
On what number?
number 11.
I'm in favor of that.
You want to? Okay.
It says public indoor ice rink.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Next one is 15, add a break in the lead-in question, and then a second break at the end. You got that? Board all right with that? Sure.
I might do that last break. If you do not think that Superior needs additional, please skip to question. I might put that all in uppercase or in bold or something to draw my attention to it because it's a third paragraph. It's pretty far down.
And that second break?
Yeah, for the, if you do not think that Superior needs additional indoor amenities. Please skip to question 17. I might make that bold-faced or something that draws my attention to it.
I think that a break is best, don't you think?
Well, I'd do a break plus I'd do a bold-faced.
Yeah.
Good. Let's see, next one I had was question number 30, dropping the note that's listed in the question.
Yes.
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 So if the manager asks a question, if you don't agree, speak up, but otherwise you will assume it would be a yes.
Okay. 35, the list, the committee and the consultant are going to look to see if there's a way that list could be rotated. If not, at least put it in alphabetical order.
Or some order that addresses the issue.
Yeah, or some order that makes
And
sense.
Right, and we may also, there could be other things, we may want to state that this is in alphabetical order, whatever order we end up with, so it's clear there is no, it's not in any order of priority.
Good
point.
idea.
Okay. Question number 37, add a break in the leading question after purpose or remove. This is the...
Remove
it.
Remove it.
So from in answering down, that whole paren
It's
is going to
gone.
remove.
It's gone, yep. And then...
But that might facilitate rewording the question.
Yeah.
Sure. And adding the word more is what...
I think, yeah, more is,
And then last question that I wrote down was whether we wanted to include the race question.
Oh, the race, sorry. It's like, what race?
We're at a racetrack.
You want to get Superior downhill miling?
All right, okay, sorry. From my perspective, if it's felt to be important, great.
If we could go back to 37, that point you just made is how much more would you be willing to pay annually for this purpose? I think that is a really good improvement, rather than what is the maximum additional tax you would be willing to pay. How much more would you annually for this purpose? How much more in taxes would you be willing to pay annually for this purpose? Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay.
That was
Nothing else?
relatively painless.
All right.
Roll 'em.
Perfect, thank you very much. I think we had
Great job.
direction. Thank you for everybody's hard work.
thank you very much.
Okay, that brings us to item number 9, but do people want to take a 2-minute break before this?
Yeah.
Okay,
Don't
2-minute
ever
break.
offer me a 2-minute break and expect to be saved.
Yeah,